A beautiful sunny atmosphere prevailed outside. People are slowly engaged in their business, walking in the picturesque streets of the city. Suddenly the earth shuddered, and people hardly stayed on their feet trying to maintain balance. Everyone was spanning without imagining what was happening. Some have suggested that it could be an earthquake. A moment after the first push, something was protected again, forcing the woman to stay on her feet. The woman was scared and could not understand where this strange, loud sound came from. The woman quickly turned her worried look at her husband, but he still kept an unmoved peace while standing still. The man carelessly assured the stranger that nothing extraordinary had happened, and he advised her to continue her journey. However, a woman cannot calm down. I am convinced that it has begun an earthquake. The green-eyed warrior with a sense of inner rest tells that the young Master Han has now gone for a walk. The woman thought it was full of nonsense, but soon the mysterious concussion repeated again. A man who is determined that the woman is convinced with her own eyes opens the door. Behind the threshold was a chunky young man. His weight was considerable, and it was not easy to move through it, but stubbornly stepped forward, trying not to keep up. Suddenly Yu Qian, having lost his balance, is unable to keep his weight. He gapped directly to the ground. The warrior immediately rushed to the young man to come to his aid. The young man instantly explodes by indignation, reproaching the man for not listening to his request to stay away. Then the guard instantly turned around and directed his steps to the exit. After several unsuccessful attempts, barely breathing, the guy finally got up. It was disgusting to his own body. Despite his own body and failure, the guy firmly stated to himself that he would never seem. Yu Qian was overwhelmed with determination and carefully planned his next step. In the end, the willpower won, and although Khan was difficult, he was still able to take a step. He screams loudly but still stubbornly moves forward. His unbreakable perseverance is so impressive that even insects that circle nearby retreat. Suddenly, Yu Qian grabbed a sharp pain that pierced his neck, gradually spreading to his head. The young man was forced to spat blood. In a moment, our hero suddenly collapsed on the ground and pants with a loud crash began to rush at the seams. The boy lay still, immersed in a shock from the events. He could not realize what that happened to him. Meanwhile, the guard was rapidly heading to a young master who lost consciousness. There was only one thing in his head. He should save Moore. The story of Gin Vegan, a guy who has moved into the past for the sole purpose, begins to save Moore. Despite the current calm in Muram, chaos and a mess soon reign here. As it appears, the faithful servant of chaos combined the apostates of Muram, dipping the central valley into a bloody flame. Having come to unity, all the clans opposed this enemy. However, despite the numerical advantage, they all were defeated. If you think about, the forces of the subordinate chaos are really striking. Not everyone can unite Moore. Jin Vegan felt a passionate hatred of this scoundrel, because of his chaos and disorder, the young man lost his parents. The young man lived the way he wanted, constantly engaging in fighting, and believed that he was no longer capable of anything. However, one day he happened to be masters who decided to send him to the right path. It seemed that in the life of our hero, finally there was a light strip, and in his eyes a spark of hope was shown. But in fact, everything turned far from as cloudless as it seemed at first. Since then, the young man has plunged into strict training and numerous tests. It was immersed in water, forced to evade intricate attacks, and to perform many other difficult tasks. Experienced mentors were subjected to Huygens' hard workout, as their purpose was to prepare the guy for victory over chaos. They realized the most daring ideas, condemning our hero to a test at a young age. Soon our hero became the owner of his dreams. His muscles became strong, and endurance unsurpassed. At the end of these grueling training, Gin Vegan has mastered all the martial arts of his mentors. So the young man has come to the pass thanks to the plan of his mentors. His mission is to defeat chaos, and then everything will come back to normal. The guy could not even imagine that he would find himself in the body with so many extra pounds. How should he train? Even if you can't step a step. Suddenly the boy begins to cough again, and his father, Sungvan, as a despair, goes to the doctor John Jonah with a request to do something immediately to save his son. Before competing with the enemy, Gin Vegan needs to get rid of overweight and improve his combat skills. The hero must find a virtuous ginseng ahead of his subordinate. The doctor explains that the fact that the patient began to spit with blood is a positive signal that indicates an improvement in his condition. The guy does not leave the feeling as if something had flew out of his head. In the meantime, his opponent will only have access to ginseng in 6 years. They begin to quarrel because the father is concerned about his son's condition and insists that the doctor immediately cures him. The boy had to carefully blow everything, However, suddenly he realized that this event would not come in 6 years, but only in 6 months. He has only 6 months to realize his plan, so you need to act faster. The awareness of this is very nervous of our hero because time is catastrophically missing. The doctor did not joke, hearing that someone dared to call them old. What a impoliteness. The father was completely indifferent to that. The main thing for him was to improve his son's condition, and it brought him joy. The father leaned against his son's chest, hugging him firmly. All this happened just because the guy spoke. In a moment, the man turned to the doctor again, sparkling with indignation, because his son's face became too red. As soon as he called his father, he reacted instantly, leaned to him and obeyed him, ready to listen. In a moment, the boy pulls up on his elbow and begins to express his request. Our hero confesses that he has the desire to take a little stroll, which causes incredible surprise to his father. However, he does not protest, but instead instructs his subordinates to immediately deliver 4-seater stretchers. In a moment, the rooms, like athletes, men with stretcher in their hands, come to the room. The father turned to them so that the son could comfortably seal on the stretcher, and his subordinates were carefully carried by his streets, providing the opportunity to enjoy fresh air. However, the guy did not realize what exactly such a walk was for. He seeks to feel freedom of movement and walk on his own. The father then turns to the chongus, and he carefully takes him in hand to support it. Although it was not easy, the man courageously withstood everything. Everyone was amazed by the sharp decision of Yu Han to stroll alone. It was quite atypical for him. Hang Chong could not be surprised. The young gentleman really got up and went for a walk. Who would have thought it was true if I had not seen with his own eyes? Yu Sung did not restrain his tears, plunging into memories of those distant days when his son was fun at the age of 10. Finally, it came to him why this body is now in such a bad condition. All present were in a state of shock, watching the young gentleman on their own. It seemed to be unreality, but only a dream. Everyone was captured when they were watching each step, literally counting them. It's 4. However, our hero is convinced that this moment is not suitable for surprise with his simple departure. The restoration of Joan has become crucial for the salvation of all humanity, so he is obliged not to regret effort in training. He will have to fight for everyone's life. Our hero trained like a crazy man, and for 2 weeks he was persistently walking. But to his surprise, no changes have happened yet. Having gone a little more, Khan decided to rest and sat on a swing, because rest is no less important than constant workouts. Meanwhile, Han Chong traveled to the farm and drove pigs into a detachment. It resembled scales. With every moment, the detachment was filled with more and more pigs. Within a few seconds, the rope that kept the pig detachment could not stand and break, sending everyone down. This indicated that the guy is still not enough to lose weight. If the situation does not change, he will not have time to do anything. So much effort has been made to get here, but it remains as difficult to destroy the subordinate. Suddenly he realized that the subordinate was only a nickname. But then, what is his real name? Our hero was deeply depressed due to the lack of any noticeable progress. The protagonist strains the memory, trying to remember the name of his sworn enemy, but he seems to slip out of his thoughts. Despite all the efforts, the name of his swollen enemy remains unavailable. Even after numerous mentions from the masters, this important detail slips out of memory. Yu Han neither remembered his name nor what he looked. The guy just couldn't remember anything. Hang Chong realizes that overweight people are usually difficult to lose weight. Therefore, it is ready to help. First, you should reduce the consumption of sugar, and then make a diet from protein food. It seems that our hero does not pay attention to the interlocutor and immersed in reflection on the ways of weight loss. Are the failures in memory associated with moving in time? But as possible if he remembers everything else about everything else? In any case, the enemy will appear in the province of Ang to find a charming ginseng. Yu Han has the idea of outstripping the enemy, finding the root first and waiting for him, because without mystical art, the enemy will be vulnerable. The guy swept the boredom, and the eyes began to close inadvertently. Who could predict that the Chaos Servant will be so weak? All this existed only in the imagination and dreams of our hero. He plans to personally deal with this freak in the province of Ang, tearing the root of chaos. The end of this mission marked the beginning of a new stage in his life, which instilled in the heart of the rays of hope. And in a moment, our hero explodes with a loud laughter. His sinister laughter breaks out, penetrating the space and filling the yard with an alarming atmosphere. Hang Chong stood in full shock, inextricably following a young gentleman whose behavior became more unusual. Hang Chong only pressed the pig firmly, sobbing, because he believed that his strange condition was a consequence of excessive training. In a moment, he left pigs and rushed to the doctor to bring him to the young master. The protagonist is strongly tuned to the successful implementation of his plan. First, you need to solve the problem with weakness and overweight, because if it simply focuses on walking, even in a decade it will not reach the desired. Therefore, you will need to find an alternative path. Instantly, the doctor, along with his assistant, moves to our hero to come to the aid of Yukon. Dr. John is rapidly approaching our hero, and he immediately notices his presence. Not yet reached 30, John became an imperial doctor, ahead of all competitors. In 50 years, he developed unique treatments that have conquered many. This man became a rescuer of our hero. As soon as Yukion declared his desire to stroll, the doctor should immediately understand that something was wrong with his mental state. Yuhan wondered if John was the most prominent healer in the Central Plain. He asked if the doctor was able to produce medicines that would help him to get rid of excess weight. The doctor was amazed when he heard that the young man seeking to get rid of excess weight in just a month. Yukion is full of faith in what is possible, so he looks at the doctor. The doctor says nothing, only swirls the eyes and nods lightly. The doctor notes that the impression is as if not his head, but the heart. Perhaps the refusal of the clan has caused him so deep pain. There are medicines that, with prolonged use, are able to restore the body. The guy asks whether he can handle in 6 months, but the doctor refuses, emphasizing, it will take at least 3 years. Yukion gave him a slap, realizing that this person is not worth counting. For our hero, even a simple walk becomes a serious test, but it is only part of their arsenal of methods. These words intrigued the main character, so he decided to find out what the doctor meant. Subsequently, they reached the waterfall. Yukinen wonders why he did not know before the powerful force of the water flow. The protagonist plans to train daily in this place. The servants think why the young gentleman suddenly buried his desire for training. Wouldn't he like to be linked in bed and further? Yukion claims that you need to fully immerse yourself in this water. It is much easier to move in water, so Yuhan decided to take steps a little deeper. Having made a few steps forward, the young man suddenly loses his resistance under his feet. The bottom turned out to be too deep. Yukion suddenly goes underwater and begins to sink. Yukion is almost suffocated, and Hunchong is watching dramatic events. However, the man does not see the threat that the young gentleman disappeared underwater. He believes that the guy is just enjoying playing in the water. Meanwhile, the main character gradually sinks to the bottom. The vital air in the lungs ends and it slowly loses strength. He needs to be saved. Hunjong does not see anything strange, and on the contrary, admires how the young gentleman was able to learn even to null. The other subordinate suggests that the Hun can be in trouble, because the rivers have deep gutters where it is possible to sink. Hearing this, a fair-haired man again directs his view to the river. Both stand carefully considering the part of the river where Yan disappeared. The man is in a dead end, not understanding how to proceed, but one thing is obvious. You need to save the young gentleman. At this time, the young man was already struggling with the current at the very bottom of the river. Oxygen was getting smaller. The young man swept his whole life, as if the footage of an old movie. Wedge with horses raced rapidly on the road, leaving the dust. And this scene is observed by our hero, a mysterious Jin vegan, who looks like a translucent ghost. He does not fully understand what is happening. In the cart, all in the blood, a woman with a young baby was sitting in her arms. It was a 2-year-old Yan. The woman carefully shakes the baby in her arms, trying to reassure her. Jin Vegan quickly realized that children's memories of Yu Han were unfolding before his eyes. Considering the 2-year-old Joan, our hero concludes that the baby was quite cute as a child. Suddenly something happens. The little one begins to scream even louder. The mother trembles with pain. Her whole body is filled with blood. She embraces the baby with force, seeking to convey to him the last crumbs of his warmth, and she whispers touches. Despite all the troubles, the honey should survive. The main character with anxiety monitors this horrible scene. Jin Vegan Hurley looks around, seeking to understand where Sung can be and why he suddenly disappeared from their company. Clean maternal tears fall on a baby, which in response gives her a smile. Seeing this, a woman also cannot hold back a smile. What happened next made the guy scream loudly. At that time, our hero was moving rapidly to the bottom, as if no force in the world was able to save him. Even the whole Chong turned out to be powerless, because he could not swim at all. He only helplessly stopped on the spot, watching what was happening. In a brief moment, a woman suddenly emerged from under the water, breathing with greedy. She held Han firmly. Hang Chong immediately calmed down, seeing that the young gentleman had not been injured. Meanwhile, the woman began to pull it out of the water. Finally reached the shore, They carefully put his motionless body on the ground. Han Chong, feeling a slight shame because of her own powerlessness, asked why she was here alone. The girl explained that the young lady instructed her to go forward, so she was here. However, it is more important to transfer attention to the young gentleman now. Recalling the problem with the young lord, the subordinate felt the excitement again. Our hero still delayed his breath, but at least touched the ground. After a certain period of time, John and Hong Chong had already been on his knees in front of our hero's father, who was looking forward to their explanations. The man was looking forward to at least some convincing reasons not to do the massacre here and now. In a moment, Han Chong breaks onto defense. This is an initiator of the proposal for the young master to swim. The proposal really belonged to John Jono. At that moment, Sung, with harshness and tangible hostility in his voice, went to the doctor. With his threatening pose, he already pulled the sword, directing him to the doctor, preparing for the inevitable sentence. The man decided to go to the scoundrel who put his son on a deadly danger. Currently, in the midst of events, the room is suddenly crossed by a black girl. The pretty stranger reassures a man a little, assuring that he was all right with Hyon, he is only fainted. At first, the girl wants to find out what Dr. John will say about it, because he has been exploring the boy's health for many years. The doctor stands up strongly and accuses all the clan of Nagin. The doctor suggests that Yu Keon, deeply impressed and upset with the refusal to marry, decided to lose weight, and John Seo only supported him in this desire. The gentleman calms down somewhat, the rage subsides. Feeling guilt, he realizes that because of his emotions, he did not pay attention to the feeling of his own son. And then suddenly a girl appears, who suddenly asks, "Why don't they just allow them to swim?" All those present are stunningly turning on her views. Yujong Hai, the older sister of the protagonist, gave an example that swimming is possible not only in the river. It passes for a while and Yu Keon finally comes to mind. He is in amazing that, it turns out, he almost drowned in this slight stream. From those shots that floated in his memory when he was on the verge of consciousness, it became clear that Yu Keon grew without maternal care. The father is so concerned about his son because he lives in fear of the loss again, as has already happened to his wife. It is clear from all that Sung deeply loved that woman, which is why he is so devoted to his son so much today. This body that has undergone such changes was the result of excessive care of his native father. Suddenly, a young lady came into the room with her subordinate. They invited Han to go with them. Our hero did not recognize the woman who entered, but soon realized he probably sister of the young man in whom he is now. However, why is this girl so impressive? Jin Vegan has doubts about their affinity. At this point, the assistant approaches Yu Hon, who lies in bed and offers his help so that he can rise. However, Yu Keon doubts that a woman will be able to lift it so easy, because even a whole Chong and 4 men barely coped with this task. The woman does not pay attention to these words, easily raises the boy and states that the best of the Chong is better. Her face is illuminated by a self-confident smile. It's time to go. And now, when they were on the street, 4 men took up the wearing of a young lord. The main character could not understand why these people were so joyfully tuned. Suddenly, thanks to the unexpected that appeared before them, his mouth was widely opened with surprise. The guy was stunned by what they saw. The workers were moving like ants, pulling stones and erecting a mysterious structure. Watching the whole action, Hong Chong seemed to manage every step of the workers. Meanwhile, workers tirelessly transported stones, creating an atmosphere of continuous movement around them. The main character stepped forward and asked, what was the unusual employment in them? However, he did not hear any answer. In our opinion, our hero has come a crazy idea. They may be digging a grave. Suddenly, our hero's sister appears and reports that now he no longer has to go to the river to swim. Yu Keon is still confused, not understanding what is happening around. In a moment, the pit begins to fill with water, and only then does the guy realize what is happening. For him, workers created their own small pond where the guy could enjoy swimming. The attendees watched the young gentleman with great joy, especially weighing that he was standing on his feet on his own. Everyone began to greet him, but the young man was a little surprised. He didn't understand why everyone laughing so much fun. His father literally forced these poor people to create a pond for his sake, but they just smile and rejoice. However, it was never to think about it, because a bursting through the crowd was shouted by Han Chong. Suddenly he noticed that the subordinate to the sister of the protagonist carefully monitors everything that is happening. He stopped instantly, changing the tone to a more serious, and assured the young gentleman that the case would be finished by the end of the day. It seems that this girl made a special impression on him. Yu Keon burns with interest. Who developed this idea? He believes that the author of this plan could be his father. If the hero is so relentless in his desire to know the truth, Homan Chung is ready to share all the details with him. All this was created by a prominent scientist who is equal to all professionals, Sung Van. His name is a true embodiment of integrity. But this is only the beginning. When the moment comes, it opens the stolen repository, generously sharing food and water with everyone. Finally, Khan realized that he was a descendant of a real magnate. Hang Chong did not cease to praise Yu Sung, but the young man was tired of these words. He has already matured another idea. Yu Qian realized that for a wonderful life he did not need to do anything at all. Finally, working on the pond was completed, and our hero took up training. Riding out of the water, he turned to the Hook Chong to the question of whether he had asked what he asked before. The man hardly lifted this object and, shaking the whole body, slowly approached the edge of the rock. Without chaos in life, a guy could live interesting days while just a fool. At that time, Hung Chong had already built the foot of Yu Hon, and was ready to throw this difficult thing into the reservoir with all force. In a moment, the man released her, and she rapidly broke into the water. This difficult thing pulled our hero into the depths, and a moment later he plunged into the water again, lifting a considerable wave. Soon the nucleus settled to the bottom of the reservoir. Accordingly, the protagonist also plunged into the bottom. At birth, the blood vessels of a person are completely open but eventually narrowed. Therefore, it is important to start training at a young age. If the body has never been a workout, the process can take a very long time, maybe 100 years. The young man believes that it is unlikely to be able to accumulate the necessary internal energy in even 1,000 years. However, despite such difficulties, the craftsmen have planned special training for similar circumstances. This training is called the technique of growing spiritual energy of the heart. Energy will fill the heart directly, bypassing the energy center. It will go through the arteries, not the usual energy paths. This is the whole essence of the technique. The main character is fully focused on the perfect performance of each movement. After numerous attempts, Conan finally managed to achieve the desired result. His heart was filled with spiritual energy that replaced personal power. The black-haired guy clearly felt her presence. Soon, the guy created a powerful swirl underwater. With each of its motion, the water gained power, and its powerful flow became more and more stronger. Watching his success, the young man decides to try something new. Yu Qian accepts a battle stand, focusing on the embodiment of his bold design. It aims to perform the legendary and powerful Shaolini technique, capable of carrying huge stones over 30 meters. In a moment, the main character demonstrates the technique of the legendary fist Ericus, capable of breaking any obstacle. Suddenly, a powerful vortex occurs on the surface of the water, lifting waves. The majestic walk of 8 immortals resembles the movements of the drunk, a casual but full of mysterious confidence. It was a sword that vibrated continuously like the light of the sun in the water. Heavenly blade of Clan Nagan. It was then that the man, sitting on the shore, looked with surprise at a young gentleman who impressed his ability to stay underwater for a long time. It turned out that Han Chong hoped that the young man would only give up in a few days, but had passed for a whole month. When the guy asked about the iron layer, his appearance was insane. And so, a little time passed as our hero emerged from under the water and turned to his subordinate. After that, they went to the Lord's court to congratulate the young owner. Meanwhile, the whole released pigs and led them to the detachment. The guy trained constantly all month, as if insane. His body was such that even the most famous masters would hardly be able to correct him. And so finally, the long-awaited day of hanging. If the guy can't get rid of this damn fat, then all hopes are lost. Soon our hero bravely takes the first step. It is on weight. Hun Chong kept his breath away from the influx of excitement, seeing impatiently how the weight arrow gradually finds his final position. His heart almost escaped from his chest from joy when he realized that he had lost weight. Tears of happiness shone in his eyes. The whole broke out of joy for the young gentleman and, without spending time, rushed to him. The boys hugged so firmly that they almost wept from unspeakable happiness. Yu Qian, having tears his joy, squeezed firmly in the arms of his subordinate and sincerely confessed that without his support, he would never succeed. A second has passed as our hero stepped back and apologized for his emotionality. But the fracture already understood everything. From now on, there is no need to sew torn clothing daily. The best days are waiting for Sandayak. From now on, everyone will become easier. Carriers will no longer burden their shoulders with extra burdens. One of the subordinates shared rumors that because of the excessive weight of the guy, there were a survival, as if he were Foster. In addition, he added that the boy was married because of his overweight. The mood of our hero changed instantly because he has already asked to stop mentioning it. A blonde man, covered by fear, shakes and reported that the manager gave him a certain task. It looked like they were only fictions because the man was fearful, and in a moment, he rushed to flee. Yu-Kion gained new spiritual energy and lost a few extra kilos, but he still has a long journey. Internal energy is developed by people through persistent training, while the technique of accumulation of spiritual energy is reminiscent of the use of magic plants or creatures. There is almost no time left, but before you take action, it would be good to restore spiritual forces. The Imperial Doctor advised to replenish the energy with snacks. The body is clearly shocked after grueling training in the water. The protagonist immediately attacked the food that the doctor brought because the famine overwhelmed him. Yu-Kion noted that Jan Shou was an unexpectedly useful mince. He is now focused on collecting spiritual energy to weave it into the body. Despite the meager amount of energy, it, like a drop down, gradually gained power. Every day, the young man was growing up, growing in strength, and looking forward to a collision with a hateful chaos servant. The time of the meeting was approaching. The protagonist continuously and ruthlessly trained, not giving himself rest. For 2 months they flashed, and daily Kion was given a hard workout, approaching a dreamy purpose. The young man was putting into life every sophisticated techniques, and each new approach became more skillful than the previous one. Every day the guy became more and more powerful. His ability to control water has been more and more striking. Streams and waves became giant. Homanchong couldn't believe his own eyes. This was really the technique of the palm. However, in a moment, he rejects this opinion. I am sure that this scoundrel is incapable of such. Suddenly he heard his voice behind his back and turned. It was Yu Sung who heard Hungry Chong called his son. The man once again clarified who this scoundrel had just discussed and was ready to grab his sword. The other subordinate ordered the Hun Chong to be removed immediately before the situation had grown into a dangerous one. The chief manager was just rejoiced in the words Han Chonga. He has long dreamed of being in a dungeon for a while. While the man is taken away, Sung asks the chief manager whether he witnessed the events just held. Yu Sung clearly noticed that his son not only trained in the martial arts, but also just demonstrated the skill in the use of the hand of the palm. It is a pity to his father that his son is indifferent to science, but he understands how important it is to support him in any chosen direction. It was barely a moment as a gray man strongly invited paper, pen, and ink, emphasizing the urgency of this request. A little time has passed. My father gave our hero a book called The Divine Sky Technology. It was a secret martial arts technique that came directly from the Imperial Palace. Yuknin knew that his father was quite smart, but how did he manage to obtain the secret technique of martial art from the Emperor himself remains a mystery. Yu Sung says that he only wrote a letter once, hinting at the interest of Yu Han to the martial arts. In fact, this is not true, because his father wrote every day. The man sincerely took care of his son, daily sending his letters with love. Not even receiving any answer, a man with a tireless perseverance continued to write his letters. My father also noted that our hero will now be a mentor. Moreover, the mentor of the young hero became none other than his sister's husband. This man is called a gambler. He is a son-in-law. He came here with an important mission, to become a mentor of our hero. The head of the clan of ladies would be ready for everything, even crawl on his knees only to master this guy's combat equipment. The guy was completely confused, not knowing how to act on these bonds. Maybe they should open the truth? However, he is aware that the disclosure of his true power will cause chaos, so it is time to remain silent. He is illustrated by the brilliant idea of justification, which has every chance to work. If someone is interested in, he will say that he studied directly in the ladies of Chun. And when they ask the technique, he only remembers the imperial divine sky. In a moment, our hero drops to his knees in front of his mentor, asking to accept this deep bow. The father was feeling tears from such courtesy of his son. Soon, Hona had to go through strict workouts. Dam Chong could not understand why Yu Konon could not cope with such elementary exercises. He was an uncompromising mentor. Anger grew in our hero's veins, and he realized that he seemed to cross the line. It seems that the nerves of the protagonist already on the verge, and if his interlocutor continues to allow himself such boldness, then patience can completely exhaust. The guy appealed to the teacher to go to other exercises because it is important for him to master other aspects. A man overflowing with self-righteousness and self-confidence was convinced that this failure never captured anything value. The guy could no longer withstand such a terrible attitude to himself. He strongly challenges his teacher, stating that it is time to check it. At first, the teacher does not take his words seriously because he did not expect such a turn of events. The hero challenges the opponent to a duel to finally find out who of them is the strongest. Only a moment has passed, but the teacher laughs loudly because he does not take the student seriously, considering him only a naive boover. The guy decides to throw a wood in a flame, stating that the teacher probably was frightened and not ready to accept the call. Yukion did not lose the chance to clamp the man with all his forces trying to get him out of balance. As a result, the teacher did not hold back emotions and decided to fight. However, the mentor, wishing to avoid uneven competition, decided to block his inner strength. The protagonist, with a light sarcasm in his eyes, watched his actions. So self-confident, the teacher began to deliberately bind himself. The main character begins his offensive by applying the technique of Dragon and Phoenix. And in a moment, he rapidly rushes to the enemy, like lightning. The young man strikes, but the mentor cleverly evades him. The mentor is amazed that the young man so skillfully combined several elements of the fist in one attack. The boy again became awkward because of great attention to him. That is why it was necessary to complete it as soon as possible. And so, only in a moment the guy struck the teacher of a powerful blow to the side, proving that only real strong personalities are able to act so. After receiving a powerful blow, the teacher was bent in pain and quietly moaned. In a moment he lost his balance and fell to the floor. The self-confident teacher did not even imagine that our hero could decide on. However, this turned out to be only the beginning, because in a moment, Han suddenly rushed at his teacher. His face shone with a wide smile, and his palm squeezed into his fist again. It was just the beginning. At the same time, the guards are tirelessly alternating at the gate of the estate. Hang Chong looked bad, and his friend suggested that he rest, but he refused because it was the order of the ruler himself. It is noticeable that the man is extremely tired and seeks sleep, but still disagrees. Suddenly, the voice of the young owner sounded. It turned out that the hose was lowered. The protagonist felt true, because this scoundrel finally received on merit. The warrior asks why the young gentleman is not in training, and the guy replies that his teacher is not yet able to do the class. Our hero believes that probably the teacher has already managed to be reached after beating. Indeed, the lady was already fully awakened and shared his wife with his wife how the student was able to win him in a duel. The man hurt the whole body. It was covered with bandages so much that he could not even scratch his head. It seems that his wife was indifferent to it. On the contrary, she seemed happy and began to jump and dance fun. Yujong always believed that her brother was an outstanding master of martial arts and was eagerly waiting for her expectations to be confirmed. When it finally happened, she was incredibly happy. When the man confessed to his torment again, the girl advised him to just lie down and relax. At the same time, the trolley moved from the place, directing its path to the prefecture of Anpine. They soon reached their destination. The rider addressed his lord with a message that they finally reached the purpose of their journey. As if the ruler did not consider the situation, he did not find any reason for personal intervention. But if Mr. Yu strongly insisted, the man had to take part in it. The ruler instructed Joe Sona to go to the clan branch in the poor region of the prefecture of Anpine. Meanwhile, Yukion slowly wandered the streets of the city. It was his first independent exit in the new body. He sought to look at the world until the chaos covered him. He watched closely at how people live around. Everyone is absorbed by their own worries and affairs. Life broke out here, bright and full of energy. People smiled continuously and radiated happiness. This scene warmed our hero's soul. In his past life, he never remembers when he heard a sincere laughter for the last time. With the servant of chaos came darkness and despair, stopping light and joy. The earth turned into a wasteland devoid of calm oasis. The chaos prevailed, which turned everything into a place of eternal holidays for the dead. Wet sleeves and icy winds that penetrate everything around. The main character hotly dreamed of being as far away from the beginning. Now his mission is the salvation of this world. Suddenly, passers-by paid attention to the young boy and were curious about what he was doing here. The rumors that Jan went for a walk alone instantly spread around. Soon the crowd gathered around the young man, discussing him and looking at all sides. One of the women kindly suggested that the young man taste a delicious barbecue. The dish looked and seemed to taste unmatched. But the young man was well aware that she could harm his body. Another woman decided to present to the young gentleman the most valuable silk they received recently. The rest also began to give their presentations. One person planned to hand over a sophisticated vase, the other selected some other interesting surprises. The gifts were amazed by diversity, from a living rooster and a graceful cat to a sword cut out of the highest quality of materials. The protagonist sought only a peaceful walk, not to pull this with him, and he has no place for gifts. However, people did not stop giving him gifts, and Yukion was puzzled. Why did they need it? The guy was genuinely glad that people surrounded by love gave him gifts, but understood that such life could not last forever. If he lived so, he would not even manage to get out of bed. Suddenly, the protagonist feels something unusual, which makes him solidify and look hard into the outside world. He looks carefully, trying to find the source of this mysterious feeling, but finds nothing suspicious. Yukion suggests that this is probably only a game of imagination, although the feeling remains surprisingly bizarre. However, the young man was not mistaken. Unknown in a mysterious mask and a wide hat watched it closely. As soon as he met his gaze, it became apparent that the mysterious speaker also realized that his presence did not go unnoticed. However, in a moment, this thought disappears, because our hero is not yet able to walk, so he would hardly be able to feel someone's energy. Unexpected turn. A stranger seeks to check the situation, but suddenly our hero looks from behind the horn and calls him to himself. The stranger was genuinely surprised, but did not intend to think for a long time. He prepared for the attack. Fortunately, Joni was able to respond lightly to the attack and instantly put the block. Suddenly, something is exploding on the street, and under the cover of this chaos, a stranger tries to escape. Passers-by, puzzled by events, instantly rush to the young man to make sure that everything is fine with him. Seeing the unconscious guy, passers-by immediately realize that the situation is critical. Saying for help, they seek to find a doctor as soon as possible. One of the audience draws attention to the suspicious stranger in the cloak, who seems to be trying to escape. It is necessary to hold it immediately, but the stranger does not stop and continues his rapid escape. The crowd tried to reach our hero, and it seems that he began to gradually come to his senses. Sleeping from sleep, he suddenly opened his eyes and rapidly hit his feet, asking, "Where did that scoundrel disappear?" The hero was in rage, ready to destroy the treacherous enemy. Around, people with fear watched the development of events, afraid to predict what it would lead to. The protagonist rapidly squeezes dust and dirt, claiming that he feels great, although at the depths of his soul he is tormented by unbearable pain. Yukion tries to unravel who a mysterious stranger was. The young man wondered how a warrior could appear in Antpin of such an exceptional level of skill. However, it did not matter now, because Appen was only a small component of the vast world of Murim. The protagonist rushed to training, because it is absolutely necessary to grind his martial arts. Training strengthens its spiritual energy, and here it is already at the finish line. All you have to do is lose weight and collect all the necessary information. He needs to know more about the charming ginseng. It seems that the moment has come to visit the poor clan. Yusung was talking about our hero. Rumors spread that science and martial arts have a relationship, and the old man thinks that his son has inherited his mental abilities. However, the girl urges her father not to raise the noise. Too early for it. It is too early to send the guy to the emperor because he just started taking the first steps and did not master the martial arts. The girl guessed that her father was going to do so because of his involvement in the clutter, and these words were immediately upset. She acknowledges that it was perhaps because of the wedding brother that they decided to cancel. However, perhaps it was a conscious decision of Nagan Shi, who, even during her childhood, never sought marriage. She sought to become a prominent martial arts master, independent and free from any obligations. However, the father still looks tired, and the daughter begins to assume that the causes can be not only in the clutter. It turns out that the husband still reproaches himself because of the death of his wife. If he can't let go of it, he will never be released from guilt in front of the Hoon. The husband of cheat of himself, because the target of enemies was he, not his wife. Yusung still believes that on that fatal day he himself had to die instead of his wife. While people in the trolley think that our hero will talk about the wedding again, their thoughts are pouring a circle of rumors, that he is known for laziness, for hours can be lying in bed. Yukion has never been a person who is not heavily trusted. I think that's why we're here now. It is important to understand your enemy and yourself. Only then will the defeat be impossible. That is why the leader of the clan Nagan, Khan Su, decides to find out as much as possible about our hero. Only a complete knowledge of him will help put an end to this threat once and for all. At that moment, Yunhon sneezed loudly, which meant that someone had discussed him somewhere behind his back. It was not very worried. He was much more concerned about the question, why were the streets quite empty? The hero looked around but did not see a soul, although the lane should be crowded with disadvantaged. After failure, John does not leave attempts to find someone, but his efforts remain in vain. Suddenly, a man with a broom appears from the horn, asking the young master what he does here. Yukon replied that he was just walking, but he was embarrassed why the poor were not visible in this lane. He says that in Antpin, he has not known poverty for over 20 years. The ruler provided homeless housing and gave them a farm to make money. Yu Qian remembered the legend of mysterious creatures hiding in the shade of the walls. They have their own network of informants and seek to extend their influence to all of Mur. This is the poor clan. Finally, the young man realized that without the participation of the poor, the existence of this clan would be impossible. The man only lifts his eyes, trying to understand what kind of clan is. At this point, another man discusses something with the ruler, ironically asked whether he really went a long way for a cup of tea. On, the head of the poor clan branch, immediately guessed that the ruler was looking for information about Yu Han, who plans to marry. It was necessary to obtain information that would once and for all allow to eliminate our hero. As we should expect from the cunning clan of the poor, they figured out everything on the fly, even without any explanation. Kion noted that information about the young gentleman is extremely important and needs a separate discussion with his head. Joe's dream could not hurt why the head decided to hide information about the son of a scientist who did not even belong to their clan. Own noted that the main question applies to the Yu. Raised by the old rage can harm not only the branch in the Anpina, but also add difficulties to the chapter itself. The leader considers his remarks. Instantly, he throws a bag of money on the table, demonstrating that he is ready to spend any money for such valuable information. But even in such circumstances, the honey cannot act differently. He already explained everything. First of all, he needs to enlist approval from the head of the clan. However, the ruler does not lose determination. He removes the emperor's ring from his finger, intending to put it as a pay. This ring provides its owner with full protection against the clan of the reconciliation. With that, the main character went in search of a house for the poor and finally found him. However, as soon as he tried to enter, he was stopped by the guard, advising to return later. Now guests there. Yukion felt discomfort because he was called a fat man, but this time he decided to remain silent and hold back his emotions. The protagonist remained stationary, asking the guard to miss him. Suddenly, the man raises his sword and sharply strikes the hero on his head. He again ordered the boy to get out. The young man was set to defend himself because they just cost him, as if with a pig. Meanwhile, several strangers were vividly discussing an old tiger named Yu Sung. Okion wondered why the ruler made such great casualties, giving important artifacts in exchange for information. Is he as dissatisfied with his family with our hero? He believes that he has already paid too much for this information. Over the case, without unnecessary disputes, transfers a book that contains the full history of our hero, starting from his birth to yesterday. However, no one should guess that this man gives him such an invaluable book. Then the man solemnly swears in honor of his clan to keep this secret. Suddenly, noise and shouts come from the outside, interrupting the conversation. Joe Sleep looks out the window to find out what caused such a host and notices our hero there with the guard. The guard was frozen at surprise to the pig agility. He did not restrain himself and praised the young man for his ability. The protagonist cannot but restrain laughter, hearing how the man with pathos calls his sword heaven. It was angered by the man, because the guy frankly caught on the traditions and techniques of his clan. However, Yukion looked over only at his opponent, not the entire clan, because in these awkward hands their technique looked comical. He can wave the sword for at least a week without stopping, but will not achieve any result. However, if this abomination apologizes right now, our hero may still have a desire to forgive him. The warrior broke up even more when he heard the guy turning to him in this way. Finally, the patience of the warrior was exhausted. The images of his native clan became the last drop. Full of righteous anger, he strongly pulled out his sword, ready for retribution. He lifted the blade to the young man's neck and was no longer going to remain silent. Having realized that the fight is inevitable, our hero aims at the fist in the enemy's stomach, putting all his power in this accurate blow. This scoundrel will soon realize that it was better to move away when he had the opportunity. In a moment he struck a new blow, but this time right in the face. Yukion mercilessly attacks the enemy, leaving no chance to answer. Gathering all his power, He literally squeezed the enemy into the ground. Lifting the enemy with one hand, he said that it was time to teach him good manners. The protagonist decides to teach him good manners with the help of strength. A predatory smile appears on his face. And at the same moment, he begins a constant series of blows on his face. The man's face is severely swollen. He calls for a prayer to stop, but Yukion remains deaf until his requests. The guy suddenly lifts his eyes and notices an unexpected figure there. The man suddenly appears between our hero and his goal like a thunder from heaven. It seems to be a formidable Joe Sleep. Despite the fact that Joe now managed to avoid danger, the man began to pursue him lightly. Suddenly, the hero felt something familiar to the pain. His enemy was already going to strike. The enemy was going to apply a powerful technique, an explosive lightning mystical palm. The hero had to find a way to neutralize this threat. The guy is aware that in this body he is not able to disperse his opponent, so he is forced to look for an alternative approach. Collecting powerful energy between the palms, it prepares for a devastating stroke. The new moon attracts the reception by concentrating energy in the palm for a powerful explosive stroke. Almost instantly, he blocks the fist of the opponent with his palms, intending to restore the energy of the attack back and then neutralize the unwanted pulse. The boys compete in fierce confrontation, and the result of confrontation remains a mystery. It is extremely difficult for both. Suddenly, the ruler looking out the window notices this amazing event. He is unspeakably to find out what is really going on. Nevertheless, the boys continue to stand in this intense pose. Who will eventually show more endurance? Although our main character has almost exhausted, he remains adamant and holds his position. It is extremely difficult for a young warrior, but he holds his eyes on his opponent. Suddenly, he meets his gaze and understands how powerful passion for victory burns in his eyes. The main character remembered his persistent training in the past life, a time when he did not get tired of 30,000 times to hone the same movement. His exercises were constantly monitored by a mysterious one-eyed observer. Jin Vegan continuously improved his actions, persistently hovering them to the ideal. The workout was a real test. Jin was training while standing on a small stone with a board on top. On this unreliable platform, he honed his movements, keeping his balance. These heavy exercises caused him intolerable muscle pain, but the guy continued his workout. And so, on a 30,000th attempt, the guy lost his balance and flew into the water with a grunt. The observer, throwing his eye on the situation, noted that the guy did not hold the sword firm enough and ordered to repeat the exercise 10,000 times more. However, even the darkness of the night did not stop their training enthusiasm. They entered the duel, checking each other's power. The one-eyed man was undoubtedly in a winning position in front of a young boy and easily won him. As soon as the man struck and the young man, losing his balance, flew his head with a crazy speed just into the ground. Jin Vegan, clinging to his head, complained to a master who turned with his sword, as if with a regular stick. Only a moment later did the guy realize that he had failed, but no longer had time to correct the words. The teacher looked at him vigorously at him. However, the teacher does not shout, but smiles satisfied. If the student has time for anger, it means that he has already mastered the basics of possession of the sword. There is no more joy for the teacher than to watch his student progresses. And here the mentor strikes, trying to push the student to faster progress. Yukion noticed an extremely familiar face in the opponent. Is it his teacher? Is it true? Turning on, he involuntarily reduced the power of blow, which the opponent immediately took advantage of. In a moment, the main character did not stay on his feet and flew back a few meters. The sight darkened, and a big bruise from the impact bloom on the face. Our hero barely captured familiar voices that desperately called him. A group of men ran into the yard and began to claim that the young master only became the victim of this scoundrel. While Joe Dream tried to deal with the enemy, the young man managed to completely dispel the explosive energy. However, the black young man remains in full indignation, not shaking how our hero was able to embody such a miracle. Meanwhile, Yu Han stretched on the ground, having beat the beats. He bitterly moaned with pain and, gnashing his teeth, promises that he will find a way to talk to this scoundrel. In seconds, gathering all his strength into his fist, he gets back on his feet. The battle for him has not yet ended. The rage boils in his veins. He is full of a desire to talk to this scoundrel who dared to intervene and humiliate it. Joe's Dream is silently staring at his opponent, as if herself insightfully peeping into his soul with his bright yellow eyes. Joe Sleep radiates a powerful energy aura. Two opponents stand in the face. A black-haired young man looks at our hero with a distrustful look, not knowing what he is waiting in front. Joe Sleep cannot understand why everyone rushed to defend this insidious thief, even closing it with their bodies. In a moment, the main character found himself on Earth, fixed. People immediately rushed to him because he fainted. It turns out that this case was already 1863rd when the guy lost consciousness. It was completely confused. The ruler could not find the answer to the unexpected circumstances that found him. Already a moment in the room enters the hoon. He was searching for the ruler to inform that the letter had already been sent to the head, and now it is only necessary to wait for the answer. Both looked at the chaos in the yard. The crowd gathered around Yu-hon, who was motionless on the ground. The ruler and Joe's dream were stunned. Was it really a honey? Their ears refused to believe heard. Hardly hearing about the incident, he rushed to the young master, seeking to find out as soon as possible. He was lightning to look at the victim, trying to understand who died so cruelly with his respectful teacher. All present looked around sharply, and in their eyes a mystical rage flared, turned to a person who dared to cause this condition of the young gentleman. Joe's dream was numb, realizing the consequences of his actions. There are no excuses left. His eyes were frightened and a little embarrassed with the crowd, but eventually found comfort in his father's gaze. Obviously, the guy felt that he was pushing into the situation because of his own mistake. However, the father did not look upset at all. His gaze slid on a book gained at a great price, and suddenly he was laughing. Only a moment, and he breaks the book in half, claiming that he no longer needs. Soon the news reached Yu Sung. The father accused the poorest clan of all, but Knen assured him that it was a mistake, and the ruler had nothing to do with it. He emphasized that all this was a clan of Nagan, and confidently pointed to Joe's son, whose view shyly slid on the ground. The father tried to justify his son, stating that he did so because of ignorance that he was dealing with a young master. But can we assume that the attack on anyone else would be okay? Although the man did not mean to change nothing. If the young man had no potential to become a future brother for our main character, his head would have long been flying from his shoulders. Joe's dream only swollen listening to the words in his address. The man ordered sharply to kneel and apologize if he wanted to avoid conflict with protection because of his fame. The Lord did not seek to take such a step. Was it really necessary? The man now stands in front of the former military advisor before whom the emperor feels revered. Yu Sung, complete indignation, ordered to prepare for departure because he intends to immediately go to the imperial estate. Immediately afterwards, he fell on his knees, starting to sincerely ask for forgiveness, assuring that such would never happen again. Two men grabbed him, sincerely soaking forgiveness. But the old man is still boiling from rage because his son is fatally wounded, and all the fault is this scoundrel. Suddenly, our hero appeared in the courtyard, and everyone was looking at him. A wonderful hairstyle immediately attracted attention. The girls created a striking hairstyle for the main character, which, however, looked somewhat unusual, and even weird. Yu Sung strongly asked his son not to unravel the braid because this hairstyle was extremely liked. Yu Sung, alarmed to his son, asked if everything was fine. As soon as he noticed the young gentleman, he immediately rushed to him. He looked at the young gentleman with interest, trying to get him off, and asked about health. Fortunately, it was fine with Hyon. In a moment, the man found himself in front of him and began to praise him, noting significant progress in his abilities. However, the main character just looked at him, without realizing what nonsense he talks about. After that, he approached the ruler, bowed respectfully and greeted, addressing him as his older brother. In fact, our hero was not delighted with this meeting. He dropped his eyes on him. The guy asked his father what they talked about. He suggested that it was about the imperial estate. Yu Sung explains that he was about to inform the emperor about this terrible act. However, our hero was not delighted with this idea because the emperor and so little time for such nonsense. The gray man listened carefully to his son and noted that he may have gone too far. However, this fact did not mean that he could forgive the scoundrel who had an attack on his son. In a moment, the young man approaches his abuser and asks his name. A young man with enthusiasm is welcome in names. Despite the fact that the age of his interlocutor is greater, an interesting fact is that our hero is still his uncle. In fact, it was just a lie, and our hero exhibited his hypocrisy. He expected for a very long time. A moment later, the guy grabbed him by the cheek and pulled him, insisting again that he was his uncle. Joe Sleep did not hide dissatisfaction, however, unfortunately, he was powerless to change anything. In fact, the protagonist felt a deep hatred of this scum, but could not contain pleasure from their meeting. In fact, in his past life, he was familiar with this one-eyed sword. It was one of the 6 righteous saints who instructed him in skill. It was his mentor, but the guy did not like him. because he was a real scratch, and instead of training, he turned with a sword as if with a stick, just to straighten the student. Even when our hero was pleased to stop, the teacher did not think for a moment. The teacher seemed to be pleased to teach Ginvegan so rigid methods. The teacher was so harsh that he could resort to beating the student for the slightest guilt. He once resorted to this when the guy threw the sword. This man's approach to education and upbringing was extremely rigorous, and every little thing the mentor immediately came out of himself, pouring anger on the student. At such moments, a satisfied smile appeared on the face of the mentor, because he really enjoyed his cruelty. And so, when Joe Sleep asks to remove his hands, the main character tastes his helplessness. The tears themselves flowed from the eyes of Yu-hon. It was only necessary to remember those unforgettable moments. Although he would like to forget about it and move on, Yu-hon's body did not forget anything. It was because of this that he immediately frozen in place. Yu-hon's eyes are filled with happy tears when he imagines how a master psychopath will finally receive a proper retribution. After a while, the men entered the premises and sat down at the table to discuss all the issues. The room prevailed. No one knew where to start a conversation and what surprises were waiting ahead. This silent atmosphere was broken by our hero, addressing his older brother with the question, "What brought them here?" The man breaks his head over a possible excuse, because the frank truth can again cause the anger of Yu Sung. The hero hypothesized that their meeting was intended to discuss the shortcomings. However, Yu Kion instantly denies that he gave this consent, which is stunned even by his own father. Yu Kion urges his father to honor his choice. He does not have time for marriage worries because in the foreground, the destruction of the servant of chaos. Marriage from calculation, without mutual consent, seems not quite correct. Yu Kion should support the empire, taking care of the new generation and future of their country. When his father learns of Han's intention to leave Murim's borders, he plunges into a state of shock. After all, outside the Murim, only the heads, bandits, and needy wanders. There is a danger there. So why does a guy want to go there? Martial art masters lay their own life path, learning from mistakes and accumulating invaluable experience. In addition, Yu Kion is convinced that Lady Nagan also wants to go his way and does not want to marry too much. Our hero is stunned by the fact that the ruler is so short-sighted that it is unable to even support an elementary game. Because of this, the protagonist appeals to his older brother to accept his proposal. However, the older brother planned to express his objections. The young man does not pay attention to others, announces the acceptance of his proposal as a perfect fact, and then he is summed up and leaves the premises. However, before finally leave the room, the guy appeals to Ohan to approach him. In a moment, the Kion appeared next to our hero like a faithful companion. Oh Khan, hugging our hero by his shoulders with a creepy look and a mysterious smile on his mouth, suggested to be alone for conversation. Men nervously exchanged their eyes, not understanding where the boys disappeared. Immediately, as the boys disappeared from their field of view, there was no silence between the men. Hardly stepping outside, Khan immediately noted the stylish hairstyle of our hero. Oh Kion, enthusiastically evaluating his appearance, notes that the guy today has a stunning appearance. However, as soon as he noted that his hairstyle looked soap, the young man immediately began to remove his eraser from his hair and open it. The young man noticed how the family gives his love for Yu-hon. He felt he wanted to turn a conversation on another topic. It became clear to him that Murim awakens an insurmountable interest in him. The guy is well aware of the names of masters of martial arts, even those who are little known. But for beginners, it is quite normal to show interest in such. The guy imagined his teachers for a moment, and it seemed to him that now they were going like oil. Now our hero has decided to find all his teachers and make them feel all the trials that he once experienced. The protagonist is convinced that this experience will be an incredible test for them. The man says that the sea once separated the clans, demonic, orthodox, and wrongful. But today, they are all focused only on survival, so there are no reasons for worries. However, for decades, they all unite under the leadership of the Chaos Servant. As expected, there is almost no time left. You need to urgently collect as much spiritual energy as possible. The most important thing now is to find his first student. It is known that he plans to pay off Jo-sun. Soon, our hero will go to training. He plans to test his hand at swimming to improve his skills. However, the young man remained skeptical that the subordinate was really worried about him. Unexpectedly on the shore, his sister appears with hard advice to take care of himself and find time to relax. Homan Chong instantly draws attention to a woman who works under the direction of Mrs. Yu John. She immediately captivated his heart. Only when she saw her did the man immediately hold his breath and began to behave surprisingly strange. Jong reproached the subordinate because he could not keep the young gentleman from grueling workouts. The girl asks whether our hero is aware of how dangerous is his stay in Murim. Their mother was a victim of conflict in Murim, and this topic remains a taboo to move the wounds of the past. But even a slight hint causes tears in the girl's eyes. However, silence does not treat wounds. The guy asks why the girl looks so frightened because it is not in her style. The guy assures her that the clan will now be protected from any trouble. The protagonist gives a warm smile, tenderness and confidence glows in his eyes. He will not allow it to happen. The girl looked at her brother and finally realized that he had long grown from childhood. Jong has always perceived a brother as a little boy, but time has passed and he became an adult. There is a time when a girl should be aware and reconcile with reality. Yukon is a little awkward when the sister behaves so strange, as if not at all as usual. The girl looks straight into his eyes, but the look has changed. He is not as usual. Her lips are decorated with a warm smile. The guy felt inconvenience of her movements. It was really awkward. Is this a real feeling of family? That's how it should be? Unfortunately, in the previous life, the young man could not survive such moments. So the year has passed. The golden autumn gave way to the cold winter, which was changed by the flowering spring, and it returned a warm summer. All this period, our hero worked hard, not stopping for a moment, honing his skills. Finally, this important point has come. Last year, it went into a new dimension of maturity and strengthened. He is now full of determination and is ready to meet face to face. Behind the back, notes in the voice of Han Chong, who warned the young gentleman, were cautious to avoid falling. Yukion was able to lose weight significantly, but now fights the problem of sagging skin. After some reflection, our hero approached his father and shared his desire to go to Anga. However, Yu Sung disagrees with this idea because of the care of his son's safety. However, despite all the obstacles, the protagonist wants to get there in all circumstances. Yukion intends to go there to prepare Jo-sun. The guy may have been too safe in relationships with them, but it is almost a family. It is worth noting the respect for his uncle. Despite all the objections of the father, Yukion still intends to go on the road firmly in accordance with his decision. He unanswered his decision without leaving his father any opportunity to objections. Yusung is aware that the son of a son can no longer influence, but continues to think about how he could stop him. Meanwhile, the guy in his room is already packing things. The guy should avoid traveling under his real name. No one has the right to recognize it. Finally, Khan finished assembling his things. Now he can be considered a free Gina vegan again. During this trip, he returns to his real name. He barely came out of the room, as he was numb. A wonderful picture. A crowd of subordinates and the royal throne, waiting for him, unfolded in front of him. On the street, there was a whole Chong who bowed to the young master. The guy was in full misunderstanding. What happens around? A delegation which aimed to accompany our hero to Anghoi gathered on the spot. Homan Chong stops in confusion, realizing that the ruler seems to have forgotten to inform the guy about their joint trip. Yu Sung is so worried about his son that he decided to accompany him with a whole delegation. In the imagination, the image of his father immediately emerged, but the young man immediately rejected this opinion. This is indeed a challenge, because Yukion planned to get a charming ginseng and destroy the Chaos Servant. No one should find out about it. But with a large group of people to hide, everything will be much more difficult. If the hero reveals his plan, his father will undoubtedly make a great noise, and the guy will not be able to justify what is happening. Everyone was already standing on the head before the exit. Yukion reflected, as if to free himself from the obsessive presence of the Hang Chong, as if the leech did not retreat. Yukion cannot allow something to go for his intention. In a moment, the young man had already invented a plan how to get around this obstacle. It's too late, so the young man advises to relax before leaving. Hun Chong proposes to move the trip the next day. An unexpected young man invites everyone to eat a drink, because they really have anywhere. Thinking, Keon has never had the opportunity to drink with Han Chong, although this man worked repeatedly and stood on his defense. These touching words were so struck by the Chonga Hanator that he could not hold back tears. In fact, these were only insincere words, part of the sophisticated plan of Joan. The night came. The men remained in the brothel, enjoying the booze. Meanwhile, a young woman, along with her servant, strolled the street. When the maid intended to report her arrival, the mistress stopped her, emphasizing that it was unnecessary. Yu Jong has already learned that her brother was going to this direction. Once a woman regularly turned her younger brother into a real handsome man. But now he no longer looks so comical. Yu Jong wondered in her subordinate whom it reminds. The answer was obvious. he reminds his older sister. Meanwhile, boys continue to drink, plunging into a discussion about their life difficulties. Yujong advises the subordinate to relax, but he replies that he intends to do personal affairs. The woman realized that the young lady intended to meet him alone, so she decided to stay nearby. Yujong was not inferior and firmly insisted that the woman would rest. The full moon was swollen in the sky. Finally, the protagonist managed to realize his plan and get rid of all the difficulties. Meanwhile, the honeychong was lying on the floor in a deep dream, completely intoxicated, unable to realize what is happening around. This is what the cunning plan of Han was founded. The hose Chong seizes, waking up and exclaiming something. The young man is already beginning to worry that his design may suffer a fiasco. To the joy of the boy, the man was a murmur in his sleep. The guy secretly mixed the poison into the subordinate drink. Its action is to scatter internal energy, so by the morning it will remain unable to even move your finger. The young man remembered how once the royal physician made masks for him because after weight loss, his skin became in a terrible condition. It was at this point that the doctor handed him the poison. It had to be applied if the enemy was too powerful to overcome it. The protagonist again became convinced that Jian Xiao is a truly valuable and useful old one. The hero hoped to support Hang and Chong because his goal is to protect the clan and more. The young man is almost going on the road when an upset sister appears in front of him. She is offended because the brother did not find the time to say goodbye to her. The main character did not expect to meet his sister here. Instantly, the Chan runs to his brother and envelops him in his arms. She persistently asks him to return as soon as possible and be careful. She emphasizes that if he is too difficult, he can always return at any time. The girl assures that they are always open to him and will always wait. For the main character, these words sounded like a melody, bringing joy. Finally, he felt what a real family was. After farewell, our hero went to his horse, getting ready to go on the road. It was not just a horse, but a special lightning hawk, a gift from the emperor himself. His expressive eyes immediately caught his eyes and attracted general attention. The young man could not imagine that one day would be a horse on such a majestic horse. Here's a young man for the last time throws a farewell look at his native clan, going to go on a long journey that promises to be rich in adventure. However, for long time consuming, you need to get together with thoughts and move forward. And so, only the moment went as Yan rushed into the maelstrom of new adventures. He rushes all night among the dense forests and spacious fields. Yukion did not even realize how the night had flashed, and the sky was already curled in the light of the paint of the morning dawn. He finally got the possession of the clan of the reconciliation. Finally, he got to his destination with his devoted horse. The young man moved to the house with a fast walk, standing alone on the edge of the village. As it turned out, it was a dining room, so the guy was in a hurry to order food, because the road was quite a lot. Yukion chose a rich range of dishes and enjoyed each of them to the last piece. The boy gives the money to the owner to call all ginseng and hunters. At the same time, the blonde stranger reached the news that in the province of Anghai found a rare clinging ginseng. Hearing this news, the man immediately decides to seize a rare ginseng. He immediately goes to his search. And then, after all, he was faced with a hunter-gathering. The man immediately asked the young man the reason for his visit to their settlement. Residents began to discuss the newcomers in a whisper. They believed that his appearance was suspected, and suspected that it could be a robber. The protagonist was already going to name his name when suddenly recalled that it was a secret that no one has the right to know. And then he decided to introduce himself to Gin Wigan, inventing the story of his alleged involvement in the affairs of the clan Y. The young man appeared here in search of a souvenir artifact for the former military advisor to the emperor. It is rumored that you can find a stone that emits purple light. The locals listened closely to his words, trying to grasp his thoughts. At first, the guy, hearing it from the teachers, decided that it was just nonsense. He could not realize that somewhere there was a stone that blows everything around the purple glow. It seems that one of the locals realized what the guy meant, though he could not be quite sure of it. Once upon a time, in his youth, a man came across a similar stone wandering through the mountains. At night, it was surrounded by the magic of nature when he saw this stone that shone like a red rays of the sun. The guy immediately clutched for these words. He definitely needed to find out where the place was. The man reported that this place is located somewhere near the top of Pagoda. However, the man warns the guy immediately. You should not go there because this is where the Fortress of 9 Dragons is located. In this fortress, mountain robbers, a brutal gang with a long history. They say that some of them have dangerous skills in the martial arts. Now the young man is convinced that ginseng is there because no one would have guessed to look for him in the bandits. Finally, the protagonist found at least some important information about it. He grabs the man by the hand, sincerely begging to show the road to that place, but the man hesitates. The young man asks for help. If a man cannot spend him in person, let him at least point the right way. The deep look of a man in the eyes of a young man reveals in them despair and a passionate desire. In the end, the man cannot stand and agrees to hold the guy to the place where the peak views. He asks the guy to promise that they will immediately return if something goes wrong. So they go on a journey, and here, after a certain period of time, they finally reach the destination. They froze on the edge of the rock, from which the real view of the top opened. Despite its small appearance, this river is really deep, so you should not even try to cross it. Yu-Kion is interested in a man where he managed to see this stone. The man points to an approximate place, although the stone himself did not see. But with the onset of twilight, he will have a chance to notice him with his own eyes. They settled on the edge of the rock, eagerly waiting for the sun to start their west. Yu-Kion plunged into the observation of the horizon, where the sun had already leaned to the event. Hence the fascinating landscape, capable of taking a breath. Our hero looks forward to the moment when the sun hides for the horizon. He seeks to catch the moment of this bright glow. Finally, he witnesses that long-awaited carmine glow. Without spending time, the guy strongly wants to move forward to take possession of a cherished stone. In the meantime, the night has already hanged over the horizon. The protagonist sends the man home, reminding him that he should return to the onset of darkness. After all, robbers may appear on the road, which is a serious danger. There can be real masters whom the guy will not overcome. Yu-Kion sincerely thanks the man for his help, giving him his pendant. Then he pays tribute and says a farewell word. In a moment, the young man quickly disappears from the field of view. Our hero chose a non-standard route to cross the river because few could imagine such courage. In the water, the young man had a significant advantage. Soon, Khan arrived in the majestic fortress of 9 dragons. He hears conversations from the inside. Someone insists on selling people who have not been caught on the border as soon as possible. Our hero believes that these scoundrels have made several raids for settlements. However, it is not time to worry about it. The most important thing is to find a virtuous ginseng. The protagonist uses his energy to identify enemies in close proximity, as well as use it to find a stone. It is at this point that a man emerges from the building. He pulls the girl, holding her hair hard. In a moment, he threw it to the ground and begins to beat his feet mercilessly while scattering the images. Yuhan is stunned by what he saw, and in his heart is a passionate hatred of this freak. Suddenly, the guy notices a little girl watching what is happening and pours tears. It seems to him that this inhuman beaten her mother. The man does not feel a drop of compassion and intends to approach the girl, but the woman has time to cling to his leg, trying to stop. Pascuda will now demonstrate this woman what it means to be a real man. The rage boiled in the heart of our hero, but he was aware that he had to hold himself in his hands. Emotions have no right to prevail above him. He remembered the guidelines of the masters who advised him to refrain from any action until he resumes. Even in cases where justice and salvation are at stake, the young man can only be a witness because the well-being of all Murim. His hatred of teachers for these words was incredible. The rage covered him when he witnessed the actions of this scoundrel. His fingers are firmly in the grass, trying to quench the explosive anger. He decides that this time he will close his eyes on it. As soon as our hero seizes pure ginseng, he will come back here to get rid of everyone's head. Suddenly the guy stops, hearing the desperate cry of the girl. She calls her mother. Jin Vegan, as if talking to himself, notes that he needs to follow the path that he has outlined himself. The guy is wondering how in such a situation he can stay away and just watch. If you decide to turn a blind eye to such brutal crimes, then why fight for the rescue of Murim at all? Perhaps it is better for him to destroy everything around him. The girl remains in place, crying loudly, while the mother shouts in despair, giving a pleading attacker to stop and not harm her child. Despite the desperate pleading, the attacker remains relentless. A reflective smile plays on his face as he brings his threatening hands closer to the girl. But suddenly the man floods blood, and he falls dead. It is a matter for the hands of Han, who annoyed that blood has contaminated his clothes. The girl froze in place, looking intently at our hero. The girl believes that the guy appeared to save them, but he reassures her, confessing that he was only accidentally here. Having realized the danger, the mother rapidly runs to her daughter and gently hugs her. Her heart is the fear that this stranger can bring them new trials. The protagonist cannot understand why she reacts so much because he just saved their lives. The woman is desperately afraid that he can also be a threat. And when the guy extends to them, she splays her eyes with fear and presses her daughter more firmly. To be surprised, the guy does not harm. He just put his hand on her shoulder carefully. There was no time left at all, so it was necessary to rise quickly and start acting. Suddenly, another scoundrel came out of the next room. Seeing our hero, he could not understand who was standing in front of him. The guy immediately coped with several scoundrels and turned to the woman with the child. "You should go inside faster until no one remarked your presence." When they entered, the guy with a tinge of dissatisfaction dropped their bodies on the floor, muttering about what they are difficult. When the young man lifted his eyes, he saw a crowd of people who gathered in the corner, frightened. The crowd looked distrustful near our hero, but the woman assured that he came to save them. Yukion urges him to give him the opportunity to explain and assures that he will bring them all out of this place. At first, the young man decided to gather the necessary information. He turned to people, asking if they had an idea of the number of robbers in the fortress. The thieves were about 50. It became a real danger because among them the masters of martial arts could hide. People dreamed that there were already troops around the fortress, ready to save them. But it was only an illusion. In fact, only one courageous young man came to them. Our hero has the only opportunity to provide a little time for escape. Everything else will depend on the people themselves. The woman believes that they are doomed in any case, so they should try and take a chance. He puts a woman headed and assures that she will become a leader for frightened people. Subsequently, one of the robbers enters the room to expel hostages from there. However, in the place of the stolen, he faces only with the bodies of his 2 dead comrades. Lifting his eyes, he notices frightened people who are pressed against the wall with trembling bodies. Full of determination, he tries to find out in them what really happened. However, the freak does not have time to finish his opinion, because in the next moment, his neck pierces the sharp blade of the sword. Of course, it is a decisive act performed by our unwavering hero. After that, Joan looked out to evaluate the situation. He was aware that there was another obstacle ahead, the care tower, so he had to be on guard. In the tower, undoubtedly, the guard was chatting, but it looked somewhat sleepy. Our hero gathered all his strength, and a moment later, a bright blue wave with an incredible speed rushed to the guard. And here she, confidently overcoming all the obstacles, suddenly frozen at the distance of the extended hand from the tower. This was not just a flow of energy, but the main character, set to go into battle. The guard did not expect to meet someone in this place at all. He was in full misunderstanding who was before him. Our hero will now teach him bitterly and send him straight to hell, which he deserves. For a moment, it strikes the tower, which makes its base rapidly cracking and collapsing. And in the next moment, you fly rapidly, and the man who was on the top is shouting loudly. It turned out that together with your husband, you flew deep into the abyss, from which, no doubt, it would be impossible to find a way out. People have frozen in a silent surprise, not believing that there is still a chance for salvation. They remembered how our hero said that the destroyed tower would be a signal for them. Then the woman strongly announced that the time came. It was necessary to flee. Meanwhile, the young man instantly returns to the room where he left the overthrown bandits. The young man rapidly breaks into the room holding a burning torch. And so, without hesitation of a second, without a drop of regret, the young man throws a torch in the middle. The house quickly covers a bright, unrestrained fire, which is getting hotter and leaves no chance of salvation. It's time to give him more liveliness. It leaves a room that is covered by a comprehensive flame. Meanwhile, thieves are peacefully enjoying sleeping in their hut. Suddenly, one of them awakens a terrible smell that sharply hit the nose. Looking through the open door, the man solidifies the affected. Before his eyes, a crazy flame unfolds. The man is lightning out from his place and rushes to the house while others still try to get out of sleep, understanding what happened. Only the man jumped out of the room. A powerful blow turned it back. No one could understand what was happening, and the confused robbers were only fascinated in the open door. They soon came across a strange stranger with a burning torch in their hands. It was our hero. The guy left his name in secret, calling only a fire. The rebels immediately raised the noise, realizing that they had a traitor among them. The hero rushed to flee while the rebels fussed, trying to grab him. Despite the numerical advantage of robbers, our hero did not lose his courage. He immediately tried to find a way out in an unfamiliar area. Yukion realized that there was no point in competing with everyone at once. They do not pose a threat, but are combined into such a number, they seem impossible to win them. There was no time left at all because the robbers found the boy and raced straight to him. If the guy had the power of fortification and the ability to absorb energy, he would undoubtedly easily overcome enemies. Suddenly, one of the robbers arises in front of the guy, trying to hit him with a spear. The hero is aware that he has few options. He needs to make a decision immediately. The guy skillfully avoided the attack and in a moment struck his opponent. A powerful blow knocked out a resistance from under the man's feet and he fell to the ground. The Paravag is clearly not on the side of the guy, but the only thing he stays is to fight. Desperately, he decides to direct all spiritual energy to his feet to add speeds to his movements. In his thoughts, a plan is born. Yukion intends to lure them into a cunning trap. At the same time, 2 guards appear on guard at the entrance to the fortress. Suddenly, a small pebble falls from the sky, immediately capturing his attention. The man bows to lift the pebble, but when he raises his eyes again, a spooky picture appears in front of him. The guards notice that a large fire broke out in the fortress and suspect that it could have been an attack of enemies. The fire quickly gains power, causing anxiety among those present. The man did not know what to do, so their views crossed in search of a way out. They realized that it was because of their carelessness that the enemy penetrated inside. If the boss learns about it, serious trouble will expect them. So the men rushed to the aid of their comrades, but suddenly some mysterious ribbons came from the bushes. It turned out that captives were hiding there, who suffered until the guards leave their posts. Now it's time to act, to run around. Only the moment passed as everyone rushed to the exit. The woman looked back for the last time and mentally expressed his gratitude to the warrior for saving her. Everyone escaped from this spooky place, which deterred them with a sad association with pain and suffering. Meanwhile, our hero almost exhausted his strength and began to slow down. It is necessary to distract the robbers a little so that people have time to escape. So the young man has no right to give up. He must do it for the sake of everyone. At this point, he met with an incredibly fast rival. The man turned out to be extremely powerful. His first blow was enough for the guy to keep his balance. However, he was able to adjust and gently fall to the ground. A silky man with a bandage on his eye, a voice that resembled a thunder blow, he asked sharply, "Who are you, the hell?" But the honey remains silent. He simply studies his opponent with a careful look without revealing any thought. Other robbers join the villain soon. They are already 5, and they are all clearly aggressive. Feeling their determination, the guy immediately realizes that each of them has mastered martial arts. The young man calmly assures that he arrived here alone. It causes mockery of a chunky man. And immediately after that, the bandits go to the young man. The scum on all sides surrounded the young man, creating a closed circle. There was no chance of escape. The young man was aware that the situation was critical, but required an urgent solution. In a moment, with a sense of dignity, the young man stated that he would overcome these scoundrels on his own. He did not need help. He hoped that his braveness would make them scare and just retreat. However, the idea was not justified. His courage not only scared, but also intrigued the leader of the opponents. Yukion almost got out of his strength, because the devastating blow of this scoundrel caused him serious injuries. The young man was alone, not imagining how to cope with this difficult situation. In a moment, the leader turned to the subordinates, asking why they were lauding instead of acting. The leader warned, "If you do not immediately extinguish the flame, everything will be covered by fire." Without spending time, the subordinates rushed to execute the order. The main character froze in place, piercing his opponent's gaze. Guak Sosun appeared in front of the protagonist, the head of the mighty fortress of 9 dragons. However, the hero did not intend to reciprocate. Guak, amazed by his courage and power, noted these qualities and suggested that he join in cooperation. Even if it seemed meaningless, the guy was forced to delay to give people a chance to escape as far as possible. Waiting for a moment, the guy sat on the ground in front of them and asked, "Is this an invitation to become a mountain robber?" The man agrees, because it is not easy to find reliable people for this position. However, the guy is both strong and brave, so he is great. Guak strongly proposes to join him, promising to close his eyes in this case. The hero remains silent, but when the robbers begin to threaten him for neglecting their leader, he has unexpectedly replied that it is just a great idea. Yukion just pretended to be a strategic plan to win a little time to recover energy. However, in a moment he rose and said that the wolf would never serve the usual mongrel. The man engulfed indignation when these words broke his dignity, leaving in the soul of dissatisfaction. The guy boldly began to tease the man, provoking him to a desperate duel. Realizing that he would not be able to persuade the boy to join him, Guak commanded his robbers to end with him. He barely managed to flash the eye as the scoundrels rushed to the honey. He quickly took a fighting position. One of the attackers is rapidly rushing to the guy, but he cleverly evades. Another moment, and the danger could be inevitable. This scum broke the bandages on his face. Most of Gina Vagana annoyed their leader, who is cunningly behind the backs of her subordinates. The enemies suggested that they were standing with a young man, But when bandages were removed from him, they were convinced in the opposite, because his skin was in an extremely poor condition. Instead, the protagonist calls his enemy a freak, who becomes an unpleasant surprise for the last. At least the protagonist looks humanly, unlike these scoundrels. These words were even more angry with his opponents. The man lifts his hand to hit the honey, but he has already changed tactics. The protagonist immediately jumps and with incredible agility reflects the sword of the enemy with his foot. The guy decided that this was enough, but he was wrong. The enemy prepared to strike his fist. Unfortunately, the idea of a young man failed, and he felt a powerful blow to his fist directly into the stomach. From a powerful blow, the guy flew a few meters ago but found his strength to get up. There were many enemies. They were moving on all sides. Opponents do not stop. They attack from everywhere, leaving the young man with no moments for rest or restoration of strength. Jin Vegan cleverly evades all attacks, but one suddenly approaches too close. A fist appears before his eyes. In a moment, his face affects a powerful fist. The fist struck with such an unrestrained force that his body flew a few meters ago. Even the enemies were forced to keep in mind that the young man skillfully mastered the martial arts because he was able to stay without energy for so long. In fact, the protagonist had a supply of energy, but he recently spent it all. The guy was problem because he underestimated opponents who were not simple adventurers but true masters of martial arts. In this condition, the young man is not able to protect anyone. Maybe it was just worth walking. But the hero quickly rejects these doubts, because in the end, he was able to save people. Even if the chaste ginseng is lost, the protagonist will not be able to die here. Jin Vegan is unwavering in his decision. He calmly inhales on full breaths. Guak has always considered our hero brave, but now it comes to the conclusion. He is just a fool. In a moment, he commands his people to deal with the failure, and they instantly rush into the attack. Strengthening the center of his gravity, the guy turned into a flexible cane, which is easily floating the river. He swore in his thoughts that these scoundrels would not forget this technique. This skill was called 8 Drunk Steps of the Immortal. Yukion turned the battlefield into a ballet scene, moving with the dancer's grace. Unfortunately, the protagonist has not reached the perfect form he owned in his previous life. The enemies froze, not realizing what mysterious movements this Netithep demonstrates. It seemed to even a desperate fear of them. It is not surprising because it is just the beginning. This combat equipment is so high speed that even light will not catch it. Instantly, a brave young man rises heading to the leader of Guak, using the reception of an invisible flight. The man was quite frightened, contemplating such a power, but gathered with the spirit and is ready to resist the blow. Obstageable in the duel, Jin Vegan struck him on his face. However, Gina seemed that he only touched his opponent easily. The one-eyed abomination cast back, raiding the guy once again. His face was covered with blood that testified to the injury. However, Jin Vegan was not going to wait for him to catch up and deliberately rushed out of the break. The guy was well aware that at this moment he could not compete with him, so he decided to retreat. The guy looked at the tall rock with fear. I am sure that the scoundrel will not dare to jump after him. Finally, our hero decided to show bravery and fearlessly showed his ungrade. This gesture was even more angry with a man. He felt neglected, and in such a clumsy willow, what our hero was. Jin Vegan has now had a personal goal. Be sure to return to the top over these scoundrels. He remembered them well. The robbers rushed to the edge of the abyss, trying to see how our hero falls. They could not even imagine that he would dare to. Guak orders to collect a detachment in search of the body of this scum. To quench his rage, he dreams of cutting her skin from Jin Vegan. The other subordinate runs up unexpectedly, bringing fresh news. The guy, barely holding back, shaking in his voice, reports that only 3 burned bodies were found in the building where the prisoners were held. Guak immediately realizes that a mysterious stranger stands behind it. It was he who helped save people and won precious time for them. Now it will not be enough to remove the skin from it. He wants the guy to answer in full for his actions. The chapter orders each corner to search carefully, and if necessary, they are obliged to return all prisoners. Absolutely everyone. So far, our hero was fearlessly flying from the rock, continuing his fascinating flight. The young man had only one chance to land well. Jin Vegan should be as gentle landing as possible. In order to avoid serious injuries, the main character should be carefully grouped. Jin Vegan inhaled deeply and the moment comes, and with a loud splash, he flies into the same river. It is necessary to emerge on the surface as soon as possible, as there is a risk that the young man can hit the bottom of the river. But unexpectedly, the young man fades, hanging in the middle of the river. He just stops plunging. Jin Vegan lowers his gaze, trying to solve the riddle of his unexpected stop. However, it is only necessary to see Gina around how he realizes that he got into a real swirl of events. Gina began to absorb in the very heart of events, and he could not understand why his plans suddenly began to collapse. The whirlpool began to tighten the boy deeper, and he was aware that it would not be as easy to get out of this captivity as he thought. There was only one boy left to stream and rely on fate. So Ginvigan decided not to fight. The flow itself chose the direction and determined its path. And in a few minutes the young man appeared in a completely different place. The current really became his assistant. When the young man finally emerged from the water, he coughed and began to swim, getting rid of excess moisture. Fortunately, he was able to escape. As soon as Ginvigan returned a little clarity of his thoughts, the only thing he wanted was peace and forgetting about all the shocks. He slowly sank on the water, lying on his back. When the young man opened his eyes, he noted that spiritual energy began to act regardless of his will. In a moment, the young man directed his energy in search of a virgin ginseng. She flew in all sides. The young man realized that he had caught the energy of the virgin ginseng. However, our hero still could not understand where this mysterious plant was hiding. Ginvigan is aware that he has fallen from the waterfall but cannot understand in any way where he was. He is trying to understand how far he has thrown. Our hero is almost amazing when he saw a plant that emitted blue energy on the lake. Immediately, the guy realized in front of him stood the same charmy ginseng, in search of which he spent so much time. Tears appeared from joy in the eyes. Ginvigan is now sorry that he has not learned more details from that unhappy exile. However, nevertheless, our hero was delighted that he could find him. Without delay, the young man decided to act. Coming closer, he began to dig. From his hands, the earth, along with dirt, flew all over. Finally, the young man escaped such a deep pit as to achieve the desired prey, the long-awaited fetus. A moment, and ginseng appears in his hands. This plant is probably called chase due to resemblance to a young child. The protagonist researched every centimeter of ginseng in detail. Ginvigan was proudly aware that he had time to prevent the actions of a servant of chaos, thus preventing the implementation of their treacherous plans. Now our hero is ready to taste this plant. In the end, he looks forward to the first coups. The coolness of the plant is noticeable from the first contact. At the tip of the tongue appears a bitter taste of ginger. The pleasure of ginseng impresses with its refreshing sweetness, filled with spiritual energy. In a moment, Ginvigan makes another bite. This energy was very saturated, but the guy could not contain her desire to absorb it completely. Filled to the edges with strength and energy, it is set to take revenge on the scoundrel. A young man from the prefecture Huayan who had not stood out before with a triumph again on stage. Meanwhile, the delegation, following our hero, got to the village, where he was known in a different name. This was greatly surprised by the Chong. The man did not even have a young gentleman. The man remembered that day. He spent all evening in glasses, and in the morning he slept carelessly. Suddenly, his peaceful dreams broke the noisy visit of Sung, who broke into a room with loud exclamations, dissolving the door with a scope. The elderly man jumped into the Hook Chong instantly and, without thinking, began to beat him for having neglected his duties and dorming. The leader even threatened to deprive him of his life if he continues to want to sleep so much. And Yu Zhong, in turn, made an effort to reassure the situation. In a moment, his gaze slides on the many empty bottles which he devastated during the night. And here in his memory emerges the image of a young gentleman who persistently poured him alcohol and urged to drink everything to the bottom. Only at that moment did the man finally realize what happened. The grandfather again raises the question of the life of a brazen young man. This time he is stopped by both the daughter and the doctor. But unexpectedly, Sung collapsed down. Everyone around in a panic because it was thought that he could leave this world. Fortunately, this version of events was false. Hang Chong heard the locals said that the horse had unusual eyes. Another feature of this animal is the selectivity in food. Sometimes it did not even neglect to eat dog feed. Then the Hook Chong rapidly rushed to the stable and turned to the guy who was busy with work. As it turned out, he mistakenly accepted this guy for our hero. Hang Chong was in despair, not knowing where to look for a young gentleman. It seemed like he was about to lose common sense. The man suddenly rushed to the boy and asked with passion how this horse was here. The boy opened all the details without hesitation, and the whole Chong was just stunned by learning about mountain robbers. In the imagination of the man, the most terrible paintings that these scoundrels could do with the young master were torn. Without spending a minute, the man was rushing to help the head hero. The young man only silently watched this strange man, but he stopped unexpectedly. Hang Chong, returning to the stable, began to bustle. He jumped in different directions and ran for a non-reconstruction, and in an instant the Chong is exhausted on the ground, broken by fatigue and tension. Due to ignorance of the location of the peak of the pagoda, the man was forced to go back. Meanwhile, in the mountains, those who managed to escape hurried through a snowy forest, hardly breaking through the cold hills. They shuddered from everyone, even the smallest rustle. Suddenly, a bearded man appeared from the tree who offered them a short road to the village. The confused travelers immediately moved in the direction specified by the man, but before disappearing from their field of view, the beards wondered if they met the boy dressed in pounds. The woman immediately realized that this man seems to know something about their rescuer. Meanwhile, the bandits do not leave the hope of finding our hero, who would disappear and dissolve in the air. Their leader will be in the handy unless they can detect this scum and give him. Then the robbers decided to divide into groups. 5 go down the river, while the rest will search the area near the waterfall. Suddenly, one of the robbers stops, noticing something unusual. Under the waterfall, he stands. A young man who points out that if something went wrong, it could become fatal for him. It was our hero. No one knew where he came from here. Jin Vegan was delighted with a casual meeting, because he planned to find these freaks. However, it seems that none of the robbers managed to recognize him, only surprisingly inspected him. After the guy tasted ginseng, he changed strikingly. His skin became much better, became healthy, and he began to attract more attention with his attractiveness. However, the bandits could not understand who was facing them. Jin Vegan appeals to the bandits, demanding to give dry clothes, tired of his suffering. Suddenly, robbers in response are sent to him by weapons. The protagonist insists that they take off his clothes again, warning that otherwise he will apply his power. Imperilless persons never realize the warning, so the hero decided to act and struck one of them with all his strength. In his eyes, hatred and anger burned. His desire for revenge was unwavering. Noticing the power of this mysterious stranger, the robbers froze in place of fear. The clothing of this freak is also soaked from such a powerful blow, so it was necessary to act more carefully. In a moment, he draws attention to robbers who tremble with horror. It became difficult for our hero. He turned into a real handsome man. With a cunning smile, he asks, "Who to undress now?" The men did not need to ask twice. In a moment, they were already without clothes, not wanting to risk beating. In addition, the young man seized weapons from one of them. He hoped that it would be lighter, but it didn't matter. Without delaying, our hero bravely lifted a spear ready to blow, and in a moment, the main character ruthlessly cuts his head to one of them. The robbers trembled with horror, became paralyzed, and could not be moved. The men began to be pleading about mercy, but the new moon remained relentless in their decision. Jin Vegan remained adamant because he promised to take his head from the shoulders of each of them. The robbers are covered with even more horror, not having an idea to whom he gave this terrible promise. First of all, the protagonist made this promise primarily to himself. Only now did these worthless realize that to save their lives, they have nothing left to escape. But it was too late. The guy took his head from the shoulders of enemies with one casual movement. It is time to hunt, because these robbers are real beasts, not people. Jin Vegan was quite disappointed. He just changed his clothes as he had already been filled with blood. The young man approached the river to clean himself of this mud. However, looking into the water, he was amazed. He could not understand whether this magic reflection really belongs to him. And only now our hero realized that it was thanks to the chaste ginseng that he turned into a real miracle. The hero was overwhelmed by joy. He could not take his eyes off from his reflection. Now, with such a charming face, no one guesses that he is Foster. Suddenly, powerful cries and noise that come to the boy are healed in heaven. The robbers have almost reached defenseless poor. The Gentile attacked an elder who had previously accompanied our hero to the top of pagoda. The old man is already beaten well. He is only helplessly covered with his hands, insisting that he is not spilled over by any word with that young man. Suddenly, someone's appeal comes to the man. The young man rose to the top, but no one recognized him, because the appearance has changed unrecognizable. Currently, the guy just settled on the ground and began to move the snow with his hands. The bandits were puzzled. What is the weirdo in front of them, and what are his intentions? Does he want to die? Suddenly, one of the abominants dared to talk to a stranger, gently approaching him. Suddenly, our brave man threw a snowball into one of the robbers. The attacker did not even have time to blink, as his friend had already found himself on the ground. Soon, a real storm of snow breaks from heaven. Jin Vegan has incredibly accurately got into each of these scoundrels. The protagonist, like lightning, rushed forward, growing up with his opponents. The robber engulfed horror so much that he had frozen in place as if he were fascinated. And so the boy was at height, hanging directly above the flock of these worthless villains. But for these Durasites, it was already late to escape. Their chance of salvation disappeared. Our hero barely touched the earth as he instantly squeezed all the opponents. The robbers were in a state of shock and could not understand how to repel their powerful enemy. Jin Vegan was filled with pride, triumphantly overcoming each of the enemies. Now, a real exaltation was raging inside. Now he had the ability to split the clouds and break the moon. Jin Vegan noted that this technique of possession of the sword is the inheritance of the Wooden Clan and is able to destroy the moon. Our hero seeks to delicately remind these scoundrels of his true essence. Turning his gaze, the guy suddenly notices a wounded elderly man who has been beating. It was the same old man who used to help Jin Vegan find Pagoda's peak. Now Jian has no doubt. He intends to take revenge for the injustice caused to this good man. The scum desperately began to justify and assure that in no way involved in the incident with this grandfather. However, our hero did not intend to listen to these nonsense. He just swung his weapon, ready for decisive action. In a moment, Jin Vegan ended with this scum. His look briefly lingered on his grandfather lying in the snow, painted with red blood. The guy leans to his grandfather, lifting him into his arms. The grandfather breathes hard, barely holding life. Grandpa looks completely exhausted. The hero pleased him to go home to avoid danger. Why didn't he listen to? The protagonist decided to try to direct a little energy through the veins to ease the condition. This will not replace full treatment, but it should be easier. It was a good decision to provide first aid. The young man addresses those around you who can help the old one. Soon a few men approach and help, lifting the old man on their shoulders. Our hero emphasizes that others go forward without unnecessary reflection, emphasizing the importance of care and moderation in motion. The guy is convinced that no monsters will no longer hunt for these people. From now on, he intends to direct the ruthless power of the gods on these worthless monsters. So, the young man goes to their clan. Meanwhile, the guards think about this green oasis suddenly in the middle of the winter. Suddenly, a powerful vortex appears in front of them, which causes surprise and makes them guess what mysterious power is approaching. It turns out that it was the main character who did not leave them for thought, immediately destroyed in place. The guy did not feel pity for these creatures because he was irreconcilable with revenge. He felt a real pleasure in clearing the world of such freaks. When the hero crossed the threshold of the courtyard, he took a deep breath and shouted the name of their leader loudly, "Guak Sosan." The guy strongly raised his voice, calling the vicious Guak of Sosan. He is here to get his head. However, only subordinates responded to his exclamations. There is an awakening limit associated with the volume of internal energy, but spiritual energy is not true. It is endowed with a life that awakens a life that permeates and destroys everything in its path. A moment, and our hero effortlessly cuts his enemy in half. He is ready to get rid of all the gums that will be on his way. Jin Vegan is constantly moving forward, destroying anyone who happens in his way. Seeing his incredible power, other robbers begin to tremble and feel fear, realizing that it is impossible to resist him. The young man notices how the attackers are already covered by fear of him, so now it is no longer a threat. Suddenly, the hero collapses the hail of the balls from which he easily twists. Soon, the same man appeared in the yard for whom the young man took this risky step, and the opponents of our hero gathered around him, creating an impassable ring. The chances of escape disappear. The young man was glad when the chief came to him personally. At first glance, it might seem that the leader was scared and brought with him ordinary hunters. However, this approach had a temporary benefit, because he only gave him some unnecessary moments. Jin Vegan emphasized this freak that it is impossible to escape from the inevitable death. The young man was already on the verge of completing the case with a decisive blow when he suddenly heard a voice that knew very well. The yard enters the whole Chong leading a delegation. He commands, "Eliminate all mountain robbers!" In a moment, a real confrontation began between men. The hero with interest monitors the enemy, recognizing his skill in battle. It was a real guard of the Clan Y. Guak Sosan resolutely ordered his subordinates, "Stop enemies at any cost, even if he has to sacrifice his own life." In the midst of a fierce battle, one man wanted to steal a good moment to disappear. However, our hero did not allow him to realize this idea. Guak tries to depart from the battlefield carefully, hoping that his retreat will go unnoticed. However, all this time the hero traveled after him, stating that the escape was in vain. Death is already on the threshold. This he has not recognized our hero, and still does not understand why he constantly pursues him. The guy again stretches his face into a wide smile and boldly lifts his middle finger. Only at that moment does a man realize who before him, but cannot understand how the guy was able to change so quickly. However, the young man did not delve into the details, only noted that he had consumed a mysterious plant. Guak realized that his situation had worsened. However, now he faces a real master of martial arts. The man is aware of the inevitable defeat, so he knees in front of the opponent and begins to ask for a mercy, trembling with the fear that pierces him to the bones. However, the young man does not have the slightest desire to listen to this request. All his life has committed many crimes. He stole children and women, robbed the innocent. Nothing could hold back this beast from committing his terrible acts. The protagonist states that such actions are unacceptable, so he, on behalf of heaven, gives him a sentence. And immediately the young man, without hesitation, cuts off this scum. His death was extremely easy, although the grief and pain he had not been given. Soon the guy is approaching the Hang Chong and asks if everything is okay. A man realizes that this warrior carries a rage on robbers. The man asks a stranger if a young gentleman has fallen into his eyes. Han Chong is undertaken to describe the shortcomings of the young gentleman for his recognition. It notes his complete absence of manners and unbreakable stubbornness. Our heroes suddenly think, "Do not hide this scoundrel here." The hero became angry with the words of the subordinate, but the latter tried to take seriousness. The guy defeated a gang of dragons on his own, and this turned out to be a very simple task. Although his actions were somewhat cruel, there is no reason to punish him for these crimes. The subordinates begged the hero to return because parental excitement is growing greatly. However, this is not the moment. The young man should remain and wait until the sinister servant appears to get off with him right away. Suddenly, he notices a rope in his hands. The young man immediately becomes clear for what purpose it is here. The servant tried to hide his intentions, but his obvious goal was to tie the young man. Yukion rushed to the side, but the former Central Intelligence Inspector confidently involved his rope. Then he sharply pulled the rope on himself. He warned in advance that he was not going to show any indulgence. All are impressed that the young gentleman was able to achieve such impressive results. Everyone was stunned by the spectacle. Yukion was a master of martial arts, surpassing the skills of the Hang Chonga. It seems that even the man himself did not expect such. The protagonist struck exactly into the chest cell of his subordinate, but it was only the beginning. Behind, he felt the presence of another enemy. The boy suddenly flew something wooden. It was one of his subordinates. Having apologized, he explained that he had to do so through the order received. Let it even look a little unfair, but they all have to achieve their goal. Han Chong accepted a fighting rack ready for a fight. Meanwhile, our hero was also prepared for the meeting. Surrounded by his faithful subordinates, he knew that they, despite everything else, were determined to turn it back. Suddenly, the same old man came to the young man, whom he recently saved. It turned out that the old man came to express his gratitude to the brave young man for his saved life. Together with the old man, his son also came to express his deep gratitude to the young man for the heroic salvation of his father. The young gentleman heard the words of gratitude to his address, which was a great news for him. Grandpa, gathering all his courage, decided to express his gratitude and joined the heavenly detachment. Grandpa is sure that everyone who was stolen is extremely grateful to our hero. He released not only those who were captured, but also brought her relief to their relatives and loved ones. Meanwhile, while the guy was busy with guests, his subordinates had already had time to tie him firmly with a rope. After that, they loaded it into a cart and went home. The guy, without losing hope, was pleading out all the way about freedom, assuring that it was in his hands that the peace and peace of Murim lies. However, the man absolutely did not pay attention to his speeches. The boy tried to stay away from his subordinate until he see the head of chaos, but it turned out to be a difficult task. The furnace takes care of the convenience of the young owner, giving him the opportunity to sleep a little. In a moment, a man sharply presses on Paul's neck, stopping his speech halfway, and immediately the young man loses consciousness, falling down. The driver notes that the young master's face is like a baby. It is strange that he was able to deal with the bandits on his own. However, the man asks not to mention the name of the young gentleman when he will share his story about the destruction of the gang of dragons. The more the glory of the young lady will spread, the more attention he will draw, which can cause some difficulties. A warrior who was driving a hole for his ability to be a truly excellent guard. Instead of the real name of John, they decided to use the name he chose for himself, Jin Vegan. Meanwhile, the young man enjoyed his carefree sleep. Meanwhile, the Chaos Servant reached the place where Ginseng was to be taken away, but found that he had already been taken away. The elusive Ginseng was to become the prey of the young owner, but there was no trace. Losing control of emotions, the head created a tense atmosphere in which it was difficult to breathe. However, nothing was disturbed by the head except this one plant. Soon, having quenched the alarm, people were able to breathe again. The man stood up, saying that there was a robber here. The situation in the Golden Estate is concerned, so he must return and support the young owner. The search for a rare plant is instructed by M.A. Her. If this abomination has already swallowed ginseng, it requires to deal with him in a rigid way, cutting his stomach, but to return the plant, whatever it is. He orders not only his family, but all friends with their loved ones. It was ordered to destroy anyone who had the slightest connection with this person. Meanwhile, the trolley raced quickly in the opposite direction, returning home. However, Hyon did not disappoint. He missed the opportunity to destroy the servant at the place where ginseng grew up, and to save Moore. Therefore, he would have the opportunity to spend the rest of his days in luxuries and wealth. The guy became angry with the subordinate because of the loss of precious opportunity, because he is fault. As it turned out, the head plans to visit Anga himself to meet his son in person. In any case, the young man was able to seize their ginseng, reaching the goal. It will still be possible to put an end to the scoundrel. Now he wants another spiritual being, a millennial shell. Finally, they got to their destination. Hun antager at for vores helte er det første besøg i en sådan enorm metropol. It was the capital of Anga, the city of Hefei. Having got out of the creepy world of chaos, his life became focused on constant workouts. And only now can Yu Kion see the true world in all its richness of colors. Trade boils on the streets, and every seller, concerned about his own business, lives his own history. On the streets, some trade food, while others, walking, choose the product. Each of these people is unique, with their own history. The fleece is preparing to release the young gentleman from the put, but it persistently asks him to stay still. The guy with great relief was released from the rope because she was extremely tight. His attention is captured by the inscription, Imperial Gate, which indicates the entrance to the clan. The guy, intrigued, decided to find out that they were hiding this gate and confidently headed in their direction. However, suddenly the guard pulled the sword and ordered him to stop immediately. They were not allowed inside when the familiar sound of the voice suddenly sounded. His father went to him with the guards. The guy sighed and smiled, watching his father unsuccessfully trying to hide emotions. Fears were quite clearly read on his face. Having extended his hands for embrace, the protagonist watches as his father, without paying attention, goes by him and goes to the hole. Yusung seems to have not noticed his son and immediately attacked his subordinate, accusing him of deception. However, the subordinate is constantly trying to explain that a young gentleman really faces him. For a moment, a gray man through the crowd looks at the young man standing nearby. However, again pushing the subordinate, he strictly orders not to cunning, but to bring his son immediately. Yu Kion decided to take the situation under control and act decisively. Calling this man his father, he caused him a clear look of astonishment. The man clearly fell off the shock. With his eyes that was burned with hope and astonishment, he looked at a young man who did not resemble his son at all. But it was worth a young man to smile as everything came into place. He immediately left the subordinate and rushed to his son. However, the man worried what exactly and for what purpose he did with his face. The ruler has already reached the news that a person named Gin Vegan. However, in fact, the young gentleman on his own deal with this task. The man was amazed at how the guy managed to cope with a whole flock of robbers. The information proved to be reliable. When the young owner tried to grab, he resolutely stated that he did not intend to give up and began an active resistance. The son remained extremely distrustful, outrageously casting his views on the head of the heavenly detachment. He was annoyed that he spreads his father's nonsense. However, the man constantly argued that this is the truth. They made every effort to achieve this. Suddenly, his father called his son as a solid, leaving that in surprise. It is unknown because of what. Since our hero lost weight, the ruler began to truly appreciate his power. The father claims that his unwillingness to recognize this fact is his worst feature. From now on, a man will personally be responsible for solving all the issues related to marriage, and no one dare to interfere with this sphere of his life. At this time, our hero sat at the table with his father and sister. The young man clearly did not like the fact that his father and sister started drinking. Suddenly, the father with an unexpected requirement to pass the state exam. It is quite unclear to his son, and he does not want to do it. Yu Nen barely broke away from the family and does not want to repeat his old mistakes again. The man suddenly joins them. He warns that his brother is waiting for a harsh discipline if he holds a military position. Regardless of his talents, the highest that he can achieve with such training is the post of general. Yukion does not guess what his sister thought of, but convinces her not to stop. However, the father does not realize what purpose is hidden by her actions. If a young man finds a wise mentor and hone his or her abilities, he will be able to climb to the pinnacle of success and enter history as a hero that saved the state. Yujong already had a mentor. This is a Vagrant Chan dream, a sword king and a former leader of the kind of reconciliation. Of course, everyone dreams of a martial arts mentor, especially if it is the one who has overcome mountain robbers. Unlike 9 schools that focus on spiritual, this family has a reputation of strong defenders of earthly values. Despite this, they remain one of the most popular for many years. If the guy uses the authoritative name of the Nagan family, his chances of Murim will increase significantly. In addition, it will allow him to finally free himself from the influence of family Y. He still has to convince his father. Yusung did not restrain his tears when he learned that the man really wanted to become a mentor for his son. The father's reaction was surprisingly emotional. Chan the Dream insisted, emphasizing what he sees in our hero of his son. The main character was overwhelmed by the inconvenience and shame when this scene unfolded before his eyes. The head became scared when he heard of anxiety that was tormented by the soul of the emperor, but the news that the Sword King himself would follow his son brought him joy. The emperor is covered by anxious thoughts about the future heir to the throne. Although he wants to leave the descendant, his head is not enough for his head to fulfill this intention. Chanson explains that the emperor has instructed this task by Sung because he rests with him with special trust. The young owner notices their interest, but he does not feel any joy because his body covers pain. It was time to divorce soon. The father, having already taken a place in a carriage, advises her son to be obedient to his uncle and be done by training. The father has been saying for a long time, but the son is no longer ready to listen. He only dreams that his father is already on the road. Finally, the carriage moved from the place. Feeling free, the main character sighs with relief and smiles. However, as soon as he opens his eyes, he has a bitter frustration. His look is greeted by his father and a whole, who, looking out of the carriage, are constantly waving him for goodbye. Suddenly, his uncle turned to him, inviting him to go with him. Our hero has been amazing. Will the action so quickly begin? When they walked the street, each passerby bowed their heads, respectfully greeting Chan's son. Yukion immediately realized that the Cans have an undeniable authority if his appearance is met with such respect. Finally, they approach the necessary place, and the guards immediately part. Now they walk the majestic stairs that stretch up like an endless ribbon. They soon rise to the wall of the fortress, but it is only the beginning of their adventure. Yukion carefully examines everything around because now he has a unique opportunity to plunge into real-life adventures. Suddenly, the man pushes away from the ground and flies high in the air. He uses a technique known as the Course of the Great Void. With this impressive technique, the Sword King easily overcomes the distance, rising directly on the roof. Taking his student's gaze, he spoke eloquently. "Get up to me." Due to the fact that our hero's rival is a Sword King, Zingun Kaban cannot be applied. If this man learns about it, then he will definitely ask where the guy mastered such equipment. And our hero will not answer. That is why the guy has mastered an alternative technique that allows him to easily push away from the ground. And in a moment Chan Sleep noted the student for his skillful ability to manage his own body. The man is interested in the guy if he paid attention to the signs of the road under his feet. Yukion confirms that he noticed. Then the teacher asks how many cities Yan believes that he has already visited. The protagonist thinks that the teacher deliberately confused him to check the observation. However, unfortunately, the guy was not very careful. When a single word sounded in response, Chan's son noted that he had been in 64 cities. All this grandeur belongs to the family of Avagyas. Our hero has frozen in the reverence, realizing how much this family is. It was difficult for the boy to realize their incredible wealth. And here the teacher pointed to the gazebo located on the top of the hill. From the gazebo to that point, the land belonging to their family extended. All these lands, without exception, were the property of the Nagan family. However, Yukion does not realize what his mentor seeks and what the message is trying to convey. In a moment, he asks what impression it left on our hero. However, the young hero still cannot understand that he stands behind it. Yukion is convinced that the mentor wants him to run back and forth, demonstrating his skills of Zygon. The protagonist is preparing to rush forward, but it only causes a laugh at a mentor, who points out that the young man seems to have not understood the essence at all. But at once the young man falls and hit his head on the ground. The reason for his fall is not himself. This teacher became the culprit. The young man appeals to his uncle with a request to explain everything in a simple way, because according to him, he is not marked. As it turned out, Chan the Dream hinted that one day all these lands could go into the possession of Yu Han. Immediately after marrying a young man on Hay, the man will take responsibility and give half of his possessions as a dowry. Finally, the main character in the mind came all the components of the puzzle, revealing why they were in this place. As it turned out, his uncle invited him here solely to discuss the wedding with his daughter. Suddenly, everything came into place. His uncle deliberately seduced the boy with the luxury of his possessions to agree to marry his daughter. Chan's sleep assures that it is not necessary to worry about his daughter because he will be able to convince her. However, our hero did not want to listen in any way and immediately found himself on the ground. However, the mentor immediately rushed to chase his ward. He firmly decided that his daughter should become Yu Han. If this marriage looks not profitable enough, the uncle is ready to increase the dowry. Suddenly, the outstanding master of martial arts came up with the restless rage of the old one of his previous life. The man tried persistently to convince the boy to marry his granddaughter, but he categorically disagreed. The teacher could not understand why the young man so persistently rejects the offer to get married. Yu Kan should not think about marriage only for the sake of the inheritance of Chan's son, because his family already has considerable fortune and influence through ties with the emperor. In addition, Chan Dream is the only heir to his influential family, so a man must forget this idea forever. The hero felt easy disappointment, because he hoped for the martial arts lessons from the teacher. Obviously, the man is in no hurry to give up this idea. He understands that the guy is passionate about the martial arts and intends to use it in his interests. The next day, immediately with the first rays of the sun, Chan Dream was already training. He studied and improved his movements carefully. The young man could not understand why the teacher woke up so early, because it would be possible to take a nap. The fact that the man just demonstrated is known as the art of the royal sword. With age, it is more difficult to ask more in the morning, but this elderly is really full of energy. The man states that this sword is not ordinary, because it is full of special energy. To prove his right, he simply throws the ball into a gorgeous tree, which is extremely high, and the sword, as if alive, cuts it in half. Chan Dream, wishing to show the student all the facets of his power, felt mild fatigue. He mentioned that the secrets of martial arts are only transmitted to direct heirs. However, there was a condition that if this young man will connect his life with his granddaughter, all the secrets will pass to him. But as soon as our hero heard about the wedding, he immediately left the place of events. Uncle just chased the guy with his proposal. The fact is that these martial arts belong only to the direct heirs of the kind of reconciliation, and he can only master them through a marriage with a girl of this kind. According to Yukon B, the martial art of the family was not different. The man was clearly stunned by Herd, and it was so cheerful that he did not hold back a loud laughter. Despite his natural talent, the guy has only recently officially joined the battle world. Uncle notes that martial art is significantly different from his ideas. Military techniques have been honed for centuries, passing from generation to generation. But the student interrupts, stating that at first glance, everything looks quite simple to play. Yukion agrees to even demonstrate his skills so that the man does not think that his abilities are limited only by words. Then the guy leans and raises the stick from the ground. He hopes that in this way he will be able to at least turn the old man's attention from himself. Fortunately, in the previous life, Yuhan successfully mastered the martial art of the Nagan family thanks to frequent workouts. However, the rumors have already flew, and even if he wakes up a genius again, it will not change anything. The hero waves chaotically, seeking to recreate the skilled movements of his teacher, and literally in a moment the young man focuses, and his movements are already gaining considerable confidence. After a moment, the guy perfectly copies all the movements of his mentor. Yu Neon rapidly and skillfully reproduces all the movements of his mentor while he stands away, enthusiastically watching the student's progress. Chan Dream simply does not believe his eyes. How could this child recreate the technique of the royal sword? Suddenly, he is concerned with anxiety, and he loudly asks the guy to suspend his actions. The man exclaims angrily without holding back emotions, because he cannot understand how the guy mastered the technique of owning the sword of the family. The young man explains that his uncle had just shown him this technique. Chan Sleep is still stunned by the amazing abilities of this young man. Just casting his gaze, he managed to reproduce his technique perfectly. This means that a true genius is in front of him. Yukion turns to his mentor, but he is so immersed in his own reflections that he does not immediately hear him and even forgets to blink. The guy eventually rejects the stick away and states that he does not plan to marry. However, what the teacher just saw only strengthened his desire for the young man to marry his granddaughter. Meanwhile, 3 strangers came to the city in huge hats and raincoats. It looked as if they were for the first time in this city and did not focus here. Their leader ordered to disperse in different directions to speed up the search process. Mahan already had some information in his arsenal. He brushed one of the local residents to find out more. It was from this source that he became aware that the mysterious stranger appeared here a few days ago and soon began the search for connoisseurs of mountain roots, aiming to find a red stone. This guy was called Jin Vegan. Now this sinister man in the hat was clearly aware of whom he should find. Meanwhile, Joe Dream was waiting at the door of the house trying to attach to his uncle. In a moment, the door dissolved and the main character appeared on the threshold. The young man is surprised why his uncle is still near, because workouts are starting from today. However, Yukion does not want to master the arts that the Nagan family is famous for. However, the young man does not intend to retreat and persistently invites that young man to go with him. In the past, Yukion looked at this expression once, and his heart squeezed with fear. But now, everything has changed. The guy looks quite ordinary. Yu Han calls Joe's son Antipadius, despite his grandfather's story about his exceptional talent. Despite his impressive physical abilities, it is necessary to develop not only the body, but also to improve the inner strength. However, even in such a situation, Joe Sleep is quite incapable of feeling the inner strength of this amazing warrior. Notwithstanding the tension, the guy grabs our hero by the shoulder and expresses that it is better to go as long as they communicate with him. However, this behavior causes our hero only laughter. This fool digs itself. It is time to take on great responsibility and re-educate your former mentor, making him a worthy student. The guy pushes his hand and notes that Joe's son has no knowledge that may be helpful to him. If it were a honey or a guy, then everything would have happened differently. The young man is already breaking the patience. He turns to our hero, calling him his uncle, and shows courtesy. But the question remains, where does he have so much boldness? However, our hero only pours the oil into the fire, bringing the guy almost to the limit. He barely holds back his fists. After all this, John called him a nephew. If he wants, he can try to take it from here by force. The protagonist had a great talent to bring people to extremes. The guy finally reached the limit of patience. However, the guy felt a deep disappointment, learning that his nephew simply called him in a brazen. Our hero suggested that his nephew would say something more preschool, but he heard was as unpleasant as the manner of his utterance, which caused a sense of disgust only when trying to listen. Judging by the face of the young man, you can understand that he succumbed to provocation. Yukion, deciding to pour oil into the fire, suggested that he would turn to him for you. In addition, he reproaches him for his inability to use even one cushion. As it turned out, Joe's Dream has never used obscene words in his life. Yukion was convinced that the guy has known many abusive words since childhood, because in his previous life it was so he had enough to mark every day. But whatever it is, his second name is the King of the Sword of 7 Sensations. Everyone experiences 7 basic emotions: fear, love, pleasure, sadness, disgust, anger, and joy. But this man skillfully sprouted them all in his martial arts. Perhaps that is why he started his days, killing him only because of his own bad mood, and at lunch, when he improved, he received a slap on his head. When it was raining on the street, even the teacher sometimes missed. It was difficult to get used to his unpredictable nature, which could change several times a week. The main character has almost always put on survival. The guy was puzzled. How did Joe Sleep once reach the peak, splashing emotions to the full, now so skillfully restrains them? If everything is so, one of the legendary Muram's heroes will simply disappear. Initially, our hero sought to help the young man find vision, but realized that in this situation, he would have to change his character. They are waiting for a difficult, long, but exciting work. In a moment, the hero finds himself in front of the guy and states that, after the beating, everything will become clear. Joe Dream immediately realizes that he used the course of heavenly wind. The guy makes a swing, ready to demonstrate the difference between the original and the fake. The guy acknowledges his opponent is able to fight well, but his style is too predictable and straightforward. The protagonist instantly evades and bounces, finding himself in the air. His legs are pointing upwards and his head down. The moment has passed as Joe Dream grabs a powerful blow, but he has time to block him, so he was hardly injured. Joe Sleep managed to hold back a mighty blow, but he notices that the opponent lacks proper protection. Instantly, Khan rushed into the attack, rushing to a guy with a fist firmly clamped to blow. The guy collects all his strength in his fists, hoping that it will make the opponent retreat. Yuhan immediately swayed the enemy's idea, realizing how he plans to use his internal energy to discard it back. But will he be able to do it? And so, without spending time, the protagonist causes a devastating blow to a guy who has managed to lift the block. Kulak's blow was so powerful that the guy, surprised, could not believe that he was really able to withstand him. Our hero took advantage of the instant weakness of the enemy to strike a striking blow and punch his protection. And it was when it reached the limit that he caused an explosion of energy, increasing the blow, like the boxing technique of the family. Our hero successfully uses the unique technique of the grotesque explosion. The force of the impact throws Joe-san to the wall. Punched it. It is difficult to fall on the floor. The guy was seriously affected by the blow. He coughs and blood flows from his nose. Once the boy was told that the young gentleman had no inner strength, but now he realized that it was only a fiction. Is he just enough for one look to be perfectly reproducing everything, even the ability to manage chi? Maybe this talent is a gift of heaven? The protagonist is approaching his nephew, who is still lying on Earth, and notes that he still has a lot to learn to reach his level. In a moment, a powerful hum of voices is heard in the yard, and it immediately becomes clear what is happening. Yukion, frantically striking his student, feels tears of joy. The young man has been waiting for this moment for a long time. His revenge day. Finally, Joe's sleep explodes with sparkling words and crying. Our hero, smiling, continues to strike him, saying with irony that it is a true anger. The protagonist did not spare his nephew at all because his heart was guided by a sense of revenge and ecstatic pleasure. All this happened because Joe's sleep is too weak to protect himself. Yukion knows. Before you go in search of the second spiritual treasure, he must first find this guy. Yukion helped a shotgun to get to the room. When he finally came to his senses, Khan announced that they would now train together. Yes, the boys soon started joint training. They constantly repeated the same movements, bringing each of them to perfection. After exhausting workouts, the guy was completely exhausted, but our hero finally managed to observe his reaction. Joe Sleep did not plan to capitulate and was taught at full capacity. Now he put so much inner strength that each of them became more powerful and more efficient. Thus, within a few days, the young man mastered the art of filling the sword with anger, which was a rather striking achievement. To achieve rapid development, sometimes it is necessary to push a person to his limit. On this, we can put a point in a stage dedicated to anger. It is time to learn how to manage this anger and use its strength. The protagonist does not stop his intense training with the new moon and, using all his strength, causes a powerful blow to his knee. From this blow, the guy tends to a whole meter above the ground. And so, our hero is strongly tuned to the final blow, preparing a fist for a crucial moment. However, he suddenly points out that in the eyes of his student, the fire of rage and anger is lit. Joe Dream barely has time to dodge the next attack, but does not seem and tries to strike. Yukion, having shown incredible agility, bouncing, and his rival is in vain his fist in the ground. Joe Dream was convinced that this time he would certainly be able to hit the teacher, but the reality was completely different. He felt a powerful dark aura of his teacher, who hung behind his back, causing ants on the skin. Yukion announced that today's workout was completed, and suggested that the student take a stroll outside the gate. Joe Dream was surprised to look at the teacher and asked where he was planning to go. At the same time, he tried to restore his breathing to calm down. However, the protagonist threw himself at the student with a sinister look for the fact that he dared to interrupt him. The young man kept a smile on his face, but the atmosphere did not emit friendly. The young man immediately jumped out of place, vigorously interested in where to spend the guest. Meanwhile, the streets of the city were crowded, people hurriedly engaged in their daily matters. A beggar was sitting near the wall whose clothes were in a miserable state, and there was no trace left of the shoes. Suddenly, an unknown passerby threw a few coins into his bowl. The beggar was infinitely grateful for the unexpected generosity, but the passerby suggested not limiting himself to words of gratitude, but a little to talk. It turned out that these were servants of chaos, who were masked by ordinary passers-by. During the conversation, they exchanged information. One of them noted that there was no one with the name of Ginvegan in the family. Of course, the man immediately agreed to the conversation. However, having learned that there is no person in the family with that name, the man feels severe shock. There was one mysterious person whose appearance strangely coincided with these events. Hearing this news, M.A. Homan instantly changed the facial expression. This mysterious person was Yu Kion. He is the only heir to Sung, and now he is staying in the estate of the Nagun family. The man asks me interested in how best to do in this situation and thinks, maybe you should seek the help of the chapter. It is at this time that our hero, along with the mentor, leave the estate. A sinister man states that they can do without assistance. Everything will find out on their own. There is no official information yet, so you should not distract the head. However, our hero already knows whom his subordinate man presented to him. Exchanging information, they completed their conversation. They divorce, playing the roles of ordinary passers-by, and the man begins to prepare for departure. In fact, they will start their performance in a moment. After the conversation, M.A. Hungen immediately gets up and begins preparation for its tasks. Two locals have noticed this suspicious guy for a long time. For several days he wandered around the family. It does not pay taxes, but alms collects considerable. It is necessary to study him for it. This wandering brazenly occupies another's place for business, so they plan to gather people to teach it. In a few hours the evening comes, and the sun almost disappears behind the horizon. Joe's sleep is difficult to pull 2 bags overflowing with books. It cannot understand why the protagonist needs so many books with sad stories. All this was intended for Joe's son to read and feel real sadness. Born in a prosperous family, he has not yet faced the poverty and pain of loved ones. The guy mentally noted that our hero has a privileged fate. A real birth with a gold spoon in his mouth, even more than he has. In a moment, Kion changes the topic and invites the student to join something extremely funny, such as the Beijing Opera. This idea causes a nice smile in Joe's son because he is happy that he will not have to train today. The guy notes that joy calms the soul without leaving room for anger or amount. Only after gaining calm does a person be able to eventually expand their outlook. In this case, the young man will be able to observe every movement of his opponent more clearly. Meanwhile, both boys are under the close supervision of Ma Kwan. He ordered his subordinates quietly and unnoticed to monitor these 2 young men. Ma Han decides to hide Han on his own, while the subordinates instructs the heir to the heir of the Nagan family. The most important thing is to remain undetected until they leave Hefei. Suddenly, someone turns to the stranger in the hat, calling him a bag of bones. It attracts the views of both our hero and his student. A group of guys who aggressively kneaded their fists approached the poor man. The stranger did not even have time to pay for his stay, as he was preparing to go to a new place. Ma Huan immediately reported subordinates about the cancellation of the plan. The man was puzzled. Why did everything go? This man was called Van Thol. He headed a gang of praise from Hefei. Soon men gathered around a stranger. He, not understanding the motives of their behavior, politely asked for explanations. M.A. Homan realizes that if the internal energy is used, it will attract the attention of the heir of the family Nagan, and in no circumstances they can be exposed. So a man must sacrifice himself and afford to beat himself. Joe Sleep notes the fight in the lane and addresses his uncle to whether they should intervene to split the fighters. The hero tells that in the real world, it is not always triumph of justice, as in fairy tales. So it is not necessary to interfere with such. It is clear that in the coming days, a gang of the poor and the gang will still compete for the right to control the lane. This group belonged to the gang Praise. Although it was formally subordinated to Cabana, it was in fact not related to him. In other words, it is not a clash between Murim members, so you should not focus on this. A moment, the boys decide to go home. Just as the commander learns that he is nearby, he reveals his true power. He is now given full will to act at full power using his inner strength. M.A. Housing easily repels one of the opponents, and soon it is suitable for reinforcement from his team. The man was angry because these worthlessness dared to intervene in their intentions. Although the gang leader had a heart that froze with fear, he still gave the team to his subordinates to battle with these uninvited guests. M.A. Homan boiled from rage because of these scoundrels, who disrupted his carefully thoughtful plan. It was a unique opportunity among a million others, and their majestic plan should not contain any error. The only way to take responsibility for the actions of this fool is only death. After their leader has been killed, he orders his subordinates. The head has ordered the subordinates to deal with these scoundrels, leaving any trace. In a moment, the space was filled with shouts, and the air had sprayed blood. However, fortunately, one of the unhappy managed to escape. Tears poured out of his eyes, and the heart was beating from panic. But he found a shelter among the golden spikelets of the wheat field. Only now it became obvious that these people are not homeless. Frightened, the man rushes to flee, realizing that he is obliged to immediately report it at the Kiban branch. At the same time, Chan Dream received a letter with a refusal to his request for a visit. It brought him in great rage. Saying that she could not agree against his own desire, his granddaughter caused her grandfather's anger. He ordered the heavenly detachment without delay, immediately follow her, and bring to me. However, it was impossible to execute the order, because he already went to the battlefield where there was a confrontation of the groups. She intentionally made sure that her letter arrived only when she had already left. Chan's sleep boiled from indignation at his son, accusing him of negligence of raising his grandchildren. Earlier, his grandfather himself stated that she wanted to raise a girl who would become a real woman warrior and would represent the family with a dignity. Then the man decides to change the tactics. Send our hero to the Union of Chongm. Grandpa rushes to the main character, intending to share with him his fresh plan. Suddenly, a cry came to his ears. This makes him think that someone could have penetrated their territory without permission. Instantly, he skillfully jumps through the gate, wanting to understand where this noise and what really happens. But when he looks at the gateway, it is covered by a real shock. The man frozen in surprise, realizing that he was unfolding his granddaughter and our hero. Chan Sleep cannot believe that his grandson is right now from blows and cannot even be defended. Yukion advises the student to put all his longing into the sword, remembering the emotions that engulfed him during the death of the protagonist from a Reed novel. Under the influence of these memories, tears performed in the boy's eyes. When the young man recalls this moment, his blow becomes at times more powerful. This force seemed to be outlined by insidious tension, as if the curved anger was hidden in its depth. Yukion draws attention to the elder standing near the wall, and wonder what he does here. Suddenly, the protagonist sharply orders his student to stop the fight immediately. Of course, the young man listens to the order without delay and immediately fades on the spot. A moment later, the young man explodes with swearing and loud exclamations. He has already started to go out, and here the teacher stopped him in this way. Chan Sleep is stunned, learning that his grandson uses swearing. A moment after our hero approaches the grandfather who sits on the wall and asks for his occupation, the man began to justify himself, claiming that their training seemed so exciting to him that he could not resist not to look. It seemed to the old man that our hero had intervened with his grandson, teaching his martial arts, but his grandson quickly denied, explaining that they only honed the skill in sparring. Joe could not understand why his teacher decided to lie. After all, he really taught him, so why was it deceived? Chan Sleep is aware that the approach of his grandson is different from their family traditions. Yukion deceives and claims that this technique was suggested by Joe-san himself. Joe's Sleep looks at his teacher, not understanding why he suddenly rushed at her. Our hero explained that it was a special technique of owning a sword, based on 7 feelings. The guy lied that Joe Dream declared a breakthrough in his skills, something like the ability to put feelings in the sword. Grandpa thought deeply about this unique technique. This meant that the sword of the failure, rejecting joy and change, began to transform, confronted with a new era. However, the protagonist could not grasp the reason that brought here the old man. The man is preparing to reveal the cause of his visit, but suddenly one of the subordinates break into the yard. He reports that the head of the Hafid branch of Kiban has just arrived. The reason for their visit was the tragedy that happened at night near the branch. They had to leave all things and go to investigate the incident. The workout was interrupted. Meanwhile, our hero cannot sync like a grandfather and a grandson can be so similar, even in a simple look. There is no business in the boy. He decides to walk a little city. Of course, all this time he is under close supervision. The subordinate addresses the commander to the question of how best to act in these circumstances. It is unknown when fate gives them a similar chance, so it was necessary to act without hesitation and decisively. The commander instructed to watch his actions closely. All subordinates instantly undertook the team. The commander ordered, as soon as the guy was in a deserted area, immediately capture him and deliver it beyond Hefei. The streets of the city today raged with life. People fussed everywhere. The protagonist enjoyed a peaceful walk, feeling the true joy of silence. In his native Antipini, the hero could not enjoy the walks because each oncoming recognized him, and everyone brought gifts. Despite this, the young gentleman was still longing for his native lands. He hoped that the locals were all right. Before returning home, the guy has an unfinished case. He needs to become stronger to ensure that everyone can continue to enjoy the same prosperous life as it is now. Our hero suddenly noticed among the crowd of a passerby who seemed to him a surprisingly familiar. However, Yukion decided to leave it unattended, believing that they may have just accidentally crossed somewhere earlier. His thoughts were focused on the desire to visit a bookstore. An unexpected young man feels very strange, as if someone was watching him constantly. There are as many people on the street as before. When the protagonist goes to his business, he does not leave the feeling that someone after him. Suddenly, his gaze stumbles on the same vagrant, which was beaten unrecognizable yesterday. Obviously, this trick was certain that good clothes would become his mask, and the guy would not recognize him. Remembering the words of the warrior about the misery that happened near the branch, the young man began to reflect on events. The main character immediately realizes that those scoundrels are involved in this. Suddenly, Keon rotates to one of the observers, which causes everyone to strain. Only the moment passed as the guy suddenly pushed this man. As soon as he pushed the man as he immediately rushed away, those two scoundrels immediately rushed after him. Those gathered a whole bunch, many people who drew from everywhere like ants. The men turned at the corner but did not find a soul. They were only a dead end. They did not understand where the boy went, because he was racing in this direction. Meanwhile, Yukion was already comfortable on the roof of one of the houses and, surprised, asked them why such a bunch of men was chased after him. Joking, he suggested that he may taste like. He instantly moves down and asks why they pursued him as if they were a pack of rats. The protagonist immediately realized that yesterday was his goal, but the plans broke through an unexpected stir. Although men are silent, the expressions of their faces clearly indicate that the guy is right. He suspects that these may be the same persons who hunted for ginseng, but late with their arrival. Men reflect on their possible actions. Of course, it is possible to kill him, but he is still the son of one who was the heir to them. If they go to such a step, they will have to face the authorities. But first of all, they needed to make sure that he really stole ginseng, so they decided to ask him directly. The protagonist is full of ignorance, as if he does not even know what it is about. Is this young man really nothing to do with it? On the other hand, in order to obtain a chased ginseng, at least the level of release is achieved, and from this, the young man does not feel any aura. Yukion is well aware that these Neo-Zs are not able to feel at least a hint of his spiritual energy. The young man concluded that these people undoubtedly have a connection with the Chaos Servant. The young man rejected the hesitation and decisively decided that it was time for them to get. He sought to find out all possible secrets and do not waste time. Understanding their mistake, men apologize and go. However, now our hero does not intend to just let them go. Yukion seeks to find out who these strangers are in fact and for what purpose they appeared here. A moment later, Mahan ordered his subordinates to neutralize the guy, and those instantly rushed to execute the team. It was striking that the head of the head did not dare to attract murderers. Undoubtedly, our hero will not allow himself to offend. He skillfully reflects the attacks of these scoundrels. The hero struck such a powerful blow that the enemy flew into the wall with a death crash. The hero was a little affected, which is perceived as so weak, and the man could not understand how a young man without any internal forces was able to do so. In this situation, our hero stated that he takes both the defeated. Now he is looking forward to a response from the enemy. This behavior annoys a man, and he seems to be on the verge of loss of control. If the enemies were suddenly attacked by the group, it can create some discomfort. But when everything turns upside down, he just arranges everything in his place, rotating the situation in his favor. A young gentleman with a wicked smile asks men if they do not want to have a little fun with him. After the young man excludes the consciousness of the man with one blow, he easily throws him on his shoulder and quickly disappears from the scene. As expected, the opponents immediately rushed after him. And here the enemy came close, ready to strike a devastating blow with his weapon. This scoundrel grabbed the hero for the robe, not letting him slip. The young man instantly oriented and determined the point where the opponents needed to lure. A moment after hesitation, he grabbed a man from his back and threw him straight on the roof. This man crashed into the roof that broke him. The frightened people ran out of the building instantly, believing that it is about to fall apart. After a moment, our hero also flew upwards to get out of the building. As he landed, as a powerful blow to the roof destroyed the house, scattering it into small pieces. By this point, his enemies have already come here. They moved much faster than the young man imagined. The bright blue glow suddenly appeared in the sky above our hero. Only at this moment did Ma-Han understand who was really standing before him. Yukon again mocking his rival with a naive fool. Yukion is terrible warning that his opponents will soon have to deal with not only with him, but also with his family and Kiban. As our hero has just said, if these scoundrels face a fuck and face a Kiban, it will be extremely difficult to escape. Therefore, you should take care of as soon as possible withdrawal from this city. Soon the villains grabbed their swords, aiming at the guy in the anticipation of the brutal battle. It was impossible to delay. it was necessary to act lightly. Obviously, these abominants decided to eliminate Han to make him silence forever. The guy certainly did not plan to retreat. He struck his foot on the ground, and the small stones immediately flew into the air. The opponents moved forward and boldly assured that now our hero would not be able to escape. However, the new moon did not plan to escape. Instead, he quickly captured the fragments that rose into the air. Without hesitation, he cleverly threw the fragments towards the opponents, using the powerful technique of 12 chain crossings from the Tan family arsenal. His opponents had the ability to act in harmony together. When several of them distracted his attention, another quietly squeezed behind, taking advantage of the fact that the young man left his back for a moment. However, the young man instantly gathered and lightning grabbed the enemy by his neck, lifting him up. He notices a pill in his mouth, which is probably poison. The man decides to bring accounts with life to prevent any information into the hands of the enemy. It is somewhat surprised by our hero, but he decides not to be distracted by the details. But the enemies have not yet been finally defeated. Ma Hong'an still stayed on the horizon. Yukion was stunned by the ruthlessness of their leader, who without hesitation, he destroyed his own subordinates, trying to erase all possible traces. In the next moment, he ordered those who survived immediately. After his order, the men disappeared from the battlefield, while our hero still remained in the captivity of the surprise from the unexpected development of events. Therefore, the hero also decides to act without restriction and intends to demonstrate them all his ability. The guy, like lightning, rushes for his opponents, faster than the wind itself. Finally, Khan was able to catch up with the enemies, but one of them grabbed the sword, trying to stop the young man. Of course, this did not change the situation because the usual sword is unable to stop the young man. The young man was lightning past this man because he did not give him any interest. He was fascinated only by the goal, their leader. And then suddenly, persecuted men, noticing the danger, were scattered in different directions. Yukion was aware that he could not allow this scoundrel to escape, because it would only cause many new problems. Fortunately, the young gentlemen have rushed to the help of the young people who were already partially informed about this situation. Yukion felt joy from support that allowed him to focus on fighting with only one opponent. Despite the appearance of the old grandfather, Ma Hamvan was distinguished by its excellent physical shape and the ability to rush at a terrific speed. However, even in such circumstances, the protagonist rapidly caught up with him, keeping his step up until the finish. The man was clearly aware that if he was caught, the whole grandiose would be at risk. So, retreating for him is not an option. He pulls out a small black ball out of his pocket. Suddenly turning around, he threw a small ball, but the guy disappears as if he were dispersing in the air. In a moment, a powerful explosion which resulted in a thrown ball was an explosive. And in a moment, this scoundrel gets a fist in the face. Yukion cleverly moved to the side, remaining outside the field of view of his enemy, who did not notice it. M.A. Houghton with frantic force crashed into the wall, breaking it into small stones. Yukion recommends the pussy to obey the inevitable because, in his opinion, her associates have already been captured. Barely able to breathe, the man asks, "Did the young man really hide his strength from the family?" However, our protagonist remains silent because he believes that the right to ask the question belongs to the winner. The guy sought to find out which group this man belongs to, but remained indifferent to the answer. The young man realized that the man was not contact, so just smiles. They remain together, having the opportunity to open each other slowly. When subordinates are aware of hopelessness, they resort to extreme events, and this man seems to be not going to be different from them. The man may be doomed to death, but he intends to pull this young man behind the efforts of chaos. Yukion knows this facial expression well. The old man was upset, and natively the impressive carelessness of our hero. The young man behaved as if everything that happened around was just a funny joke. Since our hero's subordinates have not yet come across them, the guy decided to complete the case on his own. If a man so strives, the young man is ready to deal with him with only a blow. For such arrogant and self-confident words, the man designed to cut his throat ruthlessly to this scoundrel. After all, this brazen was silent, almost without choice. The man, however, had ace in his sleeve, another hidden weapon, ready to change the course of events. When Yuhan comes to the MA has for a dangerous distance, he will only have one opportunity to strike. A man patiently awaits the moment when a young gentleman will make his move to have time to put a deadly stroke with a knife into his throat. Meanwhile, the whole retains calm and concentrates deeply. There is such martial art that will show him true skill at a completely different level. A lightweight but powerful force applies to the earth, causing a barely noticeable tremor. In every movement, the foot steps forward is felt unspeakable stability, capable of holding even heaven. The next moment, the main character is filled with energy and is ready to strike. Yukion takes a fist forward. The man considers it an attempt to scare him, but immediately feels a piercing force coming from the new moon. The main character released his fist like a shot from a gun. Manhwa did not involve such developments. His intentions were completely different. This energy seems to pull it to the wall, and within a moment the young man is approaching to make a decisive blow on his own. Yukion explains that this is a rare, long-forgotten technique of Shaolin, a fist art that can overcome 100 steps. In order to master this ancient technique, our hero had to demolish many strokes on the face. Now Yuhan breaks his head over how to do this scoundrel. It does not work in place, so he decides to take him to the family. Suddenly he was distracted by several men. Among them was the Shi, the head of the Kiban branch in Hefei. He expressed a desire to look at the beaten man, if possible. Although this desire seemed strange, the protagonist had no objection. And here, in a moment, men come to a barely alive freak looking carefully at it. This grandfather is extremely reminiscent of a thief who was previously described in detail by the victim. Peck Sleep calls for a young gentleman to convey the thief of Kiban. Yukion felt a slight surprise from such boldness of these people. He caught his own thief, and now they are just going to assign him without unnecessary ceremonies? Soon, a young student of our hero arrives at the scene. He immediately draws attention to the fact that the clothing of the mentor is torn and contaminated. Joe's dream was boiling from anger at those who dare to do so with his mentor. In some 10 days, the boy turned into a faithful assistant to our hero. When the boy runs to the main character, he lightly strikes him on the nape of his neck. Joe Dream felt a complete misunderstanding why an unexpected blow to him came to him. Yukion does not waste time to explain. He simply encroaches for the second time, forcing the student to immediately apologize. Pekka Dream looked at a man who looked dead. He did not seem weak at all. Incredibly, did this young guy be able to overcome such a mighty master? Peck Sleep looked carefully and distrustfully in the face of Yuhan. A moment later, the beard already apologizes for his rudeness. If these people have already recognized Ma Heyman, then obviously Kiban also searched him. But for what reason? As it turned out, the whole gang of praise associated with them was destroyed to the last. This is the case of this thief. Peck Sleeps rapidly asks the young gentleman, which prompted him to attack the thief. The protagonist immediately realizes that the man tries to find out the details. Yukion suggests that these thieves probably mistakenly accepted him for someone they actually pursued. Our hero would never allow someone to take control over. Peck Dream is watching our hero, feeling that the latter is competing. He does not look, trying to solve his secret. Yet the appearance of this thief had one positive moment. Even now, he lacks strength to effectively resist enemies. Moreover, these abominations are in full secret, and no one knows that they are dumping if they find out that the young man is trying to catch them. If they find out that their detachment has been defeated, it can push them to even more stringent actions. In such a situation, even the Yu family can be at risk. Therefore, the honey should be distracted. Now that he has found that the servant is not himself, it will be much easier for him to invent an effective plan. These Cabana guys are great for this task. If these fearless are to be aware of the secret, they will definitely have to face the servant and his army. The young man has a task, to send them a powerful impetus. He assures that these abominations stand something more than it seems at first glance. It only enhances the desire of Peck Soon to get this thief into his own hands to find out all the information you need. However, Yukion cannot simply take and agree because he almost died in the battle. He demonstrates a small wound on his hand as confirmation of his words. Having thought for a moment, he returns to the student with the hope of support, but the young man seems to not capture a hidden request. Joe's Dream sees his teacher, and the impression is as if he was annoyed again. The young man simply cannot understand what they expect from him. The new moon focuses hard, trying to remember all the knowledge that ever had to understand his teacher. In a moment, Joe's sleep interferes with the discussion, asking men not to put his uncle in an uncomfortable situation. However, it was this result that our hero did not expect. Peck Dream continues to demand that they leave this crime at their discretion. Joe's Dream was going to point out again that the teacher did not approve, however. The protagonist stopped him, hitting his face, and noted that once the head insists so much, they have nothing against his request. However, he put forward his own conditions. The branch is obliged to keep the participation of the young gentleman in this case. As soon as they manage to know the persons involved, they must immediately inform him. A bearded man assures that he will certainly fulfill his request. The young man returns and, making sure that no one sees him, smiles happy. He feels that everything goes exactly the plan. A branch man is somewhat annoyed. A young gentleman could not even compensate for the investigation. However, the beard is upset by a friend because our hero told them about the coup and it was extremely important. His words hinted that there were forces that intend to conquer Mur. The main thing now is that men can extract information from this scoundrel because it will become a straightforward to the old guard at the main residence. Soon they raise the offender and prepare to move it to the right place. After a few hours, the night reigned and the sky decorated the majestic full moon. In his previous life, the servant had to learn about another treasure from the Hun Doksam, imprisoned in the prison of the Chom Union. However, our hero changed the course of events because he stole ginseng. And most importantly, an enemy who has power should be more careful than ever before. The protagonist needs to become even more careful and faster to stop chaos effectively. Therefore, Yukion immediately decided to go to the Chom Union. It coincided with the intentions of Chan Sun because he also planned to send it there. At first, my grandfather could not believe it. His granddaughter was already there, so it was a great chance for their approximation. Our hero expressed his desire for Joe to go with him. From this news, a young man had a heir. However, there could be some difficulties in this because the young man has the responsibility of the heir. The young man feels the burden of responsibility for the future of the family because he has the obligation to inherit her inheritance. And because of this, he lacks the freedom of action. The protagonist is preparing to collect things, but others doubt that he will seem so easily. Going Khan noted that in addition to HE, there are other 5 hills in Muram. The protagonist intentionally says this, seeking to get his grandfather out of balance. He jokingly adds that he can no longer wait to meet with these girls because rumors of their incredible beauty will spread. Chan Sleep was frightened by hearing the news because he realized that she could interfere with his plans to marry a boy with his granddaughter. The protagonist began to imagine how he creates a family with a charming girl who gives him a baby, and they live happily. Chan Sleep fell into a panic and immediately ordered to convene a family council. Yukion was happy to have departed. I am sure that now his student will certainly go with him. Yangtze's port. The morning sun slowly appeared on the horizon, pouring light when the work was already boiling. A man in a black robe asks to focus more on something. The man removes the envelope from under the robe and transmits him to another man with an open heart. It is possible that it is a bribe. The man asks the workers to distribute the boxes faster and go for breakfast. After work, men leave the ship and their partner politely says goodbye to them. In fact, the man did not suffer from officials because, in his opinion, they only showed their wealth. Soon the ship sailed from the shore. The man carefully went down into the hold, making sure that no one noticed it. The man coughs quietly, giving a signal that everything is safe and you can go out. He reassures that he ordered his subordinates not to descend into the hold. Among the large boxes, a mustachioed man appears, who promises to pay for the rest of the amount as they get to their destination. After that, the man returns to the deck. Now they only have to withstand the clash with the pirates of Black Whale. Fortunately, at least with the payment for the passage, they have no problems. Meanwhile, new figures come to the deck. This is our hero with his student. The boys enter the dialogue about pirates, thinking why people are so horrified by these marine robes. Joe Dream was aware that pirate detention is a significant gain, but the risk of loss remains high. However, our hero treats it otherwise, not seeing the cause of concern. Yuhan's face reflected his complete ignorance of these lands. It is only necessary to touch the pirates, and problems can grow to a large scale, exceeding the initial expectations. Is our hero planning to handle the whole army of pirates on his own? In addition, pirates have a monster that a grandfather has been trying to win for many years. Our hero is absolutely not aware of what it is about. It turns out that it is a king who conquered water, named Tajin. He is also known as a sea monster. The student urges the uncle to sit quietly and not to invent anything, as it can cause the beginning of the war. However, Yukion does not respond, but only silently listens to the guy. In a moment, he silently beats the guy on the nape of the neck. Joe Sleep cannot understand why the teacher constantly resorts to strength. Meanwhile, the protagonist delves into the reflection on what was said by the guy. However, there is no other way out. The protagonist is honestly aware that it is better to stay away now and not interfere. A flock of seagulls spread over the ship. Suddenly, one of the sailors notes the approach of the pirate ship with the Black Whale emblem. All on board were immediately frozen in silence and concentrated. Vigilance became the main rule. Soon the pirate ship cut the waves, approaching a peaceful vessel. The pirates lowered the ladder between the ships and boldly stepped on it. Soon the pirates go to the deck of someone else's vessel. The pirate captain boldly welcomes the man who is responsible for everything on this ship. Instantly, the leader orders one of the subordinates to deliver the passage for the passage. In a moment, they bring a chest filled with gold. Kudok felt great gratitude for the fact that this man understood everything without explanations. Joe Dream watched this, realizing that the agreement was completing with success. The young man could not understand why these malicious pirates still remain here, despite the fact that they had already received their reward. As it turned out, the captain had another thing. It was necessary to find a certain person. Ku did not ask if everyone gathered on the deck, or maybe the head of someone hides something. But Captain Pirates were well aware that sometimes the head was able to miss violators. If this is not the one they are looking for, the pirate will just close the eyes on it. The chapter, however, takes care of his own safety, decides to speak. It just goes away as he confesses that one melon is hidden in the vessel. The dock appeals to passengers for help, explaining that they are looking for a criminal who has escaped. It guarantees that assistance will be calm and safety, and passengers without doubt threatens anything. The pirate captain ordered everyone to stand in one line. Meanwhile, our hero admired the incredible landscapes of the vast sea. One of the pirates noticed him. The pirate is unnoticed and stunned him on the head. He dared at this bold step because our hero refused to obey the order of the captain and did not take a place in order. Joe's Dream was frightened to the heart, fearing that his uncle could lose control and think his own way. He watched the expression of his uncle that flashed with anger. Suddenly, strange screams begin to be heard from the hold, which immediately attract attention. In a moment, a mustachioed man appears on the deck. The doc states that he did not consent to the exit and instead resent the fact that his people dare to hit. Caban really made an effort to find this man, but do they want to punish him with the help of pathetic pirates? Hearing this, the captain was inflamed from indignation. He intended to rip his head out of him. Watching this episode, the protagonist noted that the pirate was quite skillful in the martial arts. But the attempt to engage the mustachioed man was in vain. He jumped virtually and evaded the blow. The audience stunned their heads, fascinated by the stranger's movements. Suddenly, the protagonist, grabbing his place, grabbed his sword and proclaimed that he would eradicate these scoundrels. For unknown reasons, his uncle rushed into battle. Everyone in the community kept breathing, watching a fierce battle. The pirate ruthlessly tore his opponent's clothes. Suddenly, the hero draws attention to the tattoo. A bright red snake twists in the stranger's hand. He recalls that the Chong Union prison was a man with a red snake tattoo. This stranger knows where the second treasure, which is so needed by our hero, is hidden. Yukion could not believe his happiness. Good luck was on his side, as if heaven himself decided to go with him. Joe's Dream called the guy, noting that he would not interfere, as it is his promise. However, Yukion is different. He does not want to listen to the remark. Instead, he orders the student to take care of the safety of people. Warning: if someone is injured, he is waiting for 2 days of intensive training, full of discontent. The boy gets a sword, ready to stand up for ordinary people. However, there are much more opponents than can be overcome. The only way out is to accelerate the sword's movements. The feeling of sadness gives the sword of incredible lightness. So the guy makes every effort to cause tears. The young man instantly protects all peaceful inhabitants, skillfully reflecting every pirate attack. Peaceful residents look at their defender with gratitude, rejoicing that they were saved. Joe's Dream does not understand anything in the intentions of his teacher. Meanwhile, a fierce duel continues between the captain and the mysterious stranger. Doksam's Hun is clearly aware that his opponent is extremely persistent in combating him. This is what he decides to use to win. Suddenly, something lightly, quickly, and mysterious broke between the men. The protagonist appeared lightly in front of a mustache man, standing for his defense. The hero's hand closed his fist, and he powerfully healed the captain. The puzzled, mustachioed man could not understand why this stranger decided to protect him. Yukion, without delay, asked a direct question. Can this man confirm that he is actually a trick? The answer was not necessary. Everything was red on his face. Our brave man decided to save her husband, but he had a question. The hero turns to pirates, stating that he needs this mustache man. He puts them an ultimatum. Either they go away peacefully, or he will be forced to kill them all. However, pirates only in the silence were monitored by our hero, as if they were looking at the fool. When Yukion turned to understand that he was going around, he was surprised to find that Adoxum, who stood nearby a minute ago, disappeared without a trace. The young man Rosmich rushes to the edge of the ship, hoping to see where his satellite went. It turns out that this brave man just jumped straight into the open sea. The protagonist will not understand why this man escaped from him, though he saved him. Meanwhile, the captain of the consciousness and told his pirates to grab this freak. It was not a moment as the pirates rushed from their ship into the chase behind him. Our hero only breathed deeply, realizing that it would be a difficult challenge and the solution will not be found so quickly. Suddenly, the young man appealed to his subordinate and ordered him to remove the leader of the pirates. If the young man fails to complete the task, the mentor promises a strict punishment in the form of grueling training. Joe Dream was determined to win to avoid grueling workouts. In a moment, the main character rushed into the sea to catch up with the unknown. In the water, he seems a shark. His native element awakens his true nature. Joe Sleep is approaching Captain Pirates, trying to find out who he really is and why they pursue this man. But in a moment, the young man recalls the order to destroy this abomination and strongly pulls out his sword. For the guy, the Doc was only a pathetic pirate who just almost lost people. Joe Sleep does not want to waste his extra time, so he strongly grabs him for his hair. Meanwhile, Yukion is already caught up with the pirates who pursued the Doc Samhan. In response to the tireless persecution of the young man, the pirates snatched the sword, hoping to finally neutralize him. However, when the pirate made a blow, the surprise was absorbed, because there was no trace of the young man behind. Where did this mysterious stranger disappear? The man was ambushed, waiting for a right moment. Suddenly, Yukion appeared from above and struck him right in his face. The blow was so powerful that the pirate flew straight to the bottom of the sea. However, the battle did not end. Danger was boiling around. Many pirates continued to hunt a Doxama. The protagonist, without hesitation, was confidently stepping on their heads. Yukion easily jumped from one head to the other as if they were only ordinary stones, and a wide river stretched before him. The main character pleased the idea that he would be able to cross Yangtze, stepping on the heads of pirates. Finally, the protagonist was lightly approaching Mr. Doxam to meet him face to face. The protagonist almost reached his goal, while the pirates remained in a helpless state. Mr. Doxam believed that this guy was a skillful swimmer over the waves. However, in fact, the young man had a thorough martial arts, which created the illusion of a casual flight. But even if it happens, a mustachioed man will not allow him to be caught, so our hero is quite annoyed, because it cannot understand what purpose it is to waste their efforts without real need. The man causes a strong blow to his fist, but the young guy skillfully avoids him. Unexpectedly for the opponent, Khan instantly grabs him for his clothes, not giving a chance on a counterattack. In a moment, he seamlessly squeezes it directly to the shore. The hero again assures the man that he is ready to save him if he can answer his question correctly. However, Doxam's Hun in nervous perturbation screams, stating that she is not going to trust such scoundrels as this young man. The protagonist was amazed at the disrespectful of this man. He did not even introduce himself, but had already started to offend. Mr. Hangen trembled all the fear, but the young man confidently advised him not to think about escape. He assured that he would understand anyone who dared to interfere with their conversation. Instantly, the young man presses on a certain point near the man's clavicle. After that, the man loses the ability to utter a word. The protagonist calls for him to understand him correctly. He only wants to prevent the new escape of Mr. Hvan. Soon the same pirates appear on the coast, who constantly pursued a man all this time. Yukion is lightly thinking about what actions it is worth choosing when there are so many enemies around. And here he was illuminated by the idea to use the secret weapon of the Tang clan. It will become ideal in this position. Almost instantly, the poor pirates, grabbing the swords, rushed to the young man with a roar. However, the young nobleman did not show any haste. At first, Keon was a calm character, however. According to his strict mentor, Anna Chong's, even the most comfortable thing can turn into a hidden weapon. By raising your level, you can even turn sand into a formidable weapon, not just stones. And now this is enough. For example, in the Fortress of Nine Dragons, our hero turned simple snow into a formidable weapon. Now the guy gathered a bunch of stones to turn him into a relentless weapon. Only a moment later, fragile stones will fly towards the enemies, threatening their safety. The stones rush at a frantic speed and reaches the target, causing the pirates. In a moment, the pirates are exhausted on the ground, covered with numerous wounds and bruises. Pirates, still on their feet, were scared of fear. They were shaken by fright. Yuhan is aware that if the events develop in the same spirit, a war will begin, which will bring suffering to innocent people, and he cannot allow it. In such a situation, the only way out is to eliminate all eyewitnesses. As soon as the pathetic pirate saw how the guy pulled the sword and heard his warnings, then immediately settled. However, the escape seemed in vain, because Yuhan is certainly catching up with each of them and does not suffer the slightest pity. In just a few minutes, the pirates were destroyed, and the young man turned to Mr. Kwan again. Yukion approached the scared Mr. Han and, gently touching his face with his fingers, sowed even more fear in it. Doxum's honeysuckle still tries to understand who is a strange stranger in front of him. Meanwhile, the hero seems like Gin Vegan. The young man cannot reveal his true person because it is likely that a man has a connection with a servant. Now his task is to develop a plan to find out more about the treasure. The protagonist had only one question and asked to treat it with all seriousness. Gin Vegan strongly asked the man's location of a millennial shell. Mr. Han was amazed and could not figure out how the young man got such information. The man's reaction stated that he really knew where she was. Doxum's dud tries to pretend that he has no idea what it is and where it can be. But instead of being convincing, his lie sounds unconvincing. So, our hero intends to find out something and rises to his feet. Gin Vegan mercilessly strikes his feet on her husband, trying to shake this significant information from him. The protagonist relentlessly strikes a blow, emphasizing that he can keep a failure in this state endlessly. It is at this moment that the boat, which is just asleep, is approaching the shore. However, the young man does not stop why the teacher goes so far. Now he gambles this man even harder than he usually takes the boy into turnover. As it turned out, Joe Dream forced Gudoka to become a beat boy. Heichu Doc survived a cruel beating, and all this was arranged by the agile hands of the young Brazen. At first, Joe's dream drove the pirate to paddle faster, but now orders to reduce the pace. The captain decides to suffer a little and comfort himself with the idea that these two will certainly be captured when the main ones come. In the end, Mr. Hanan returned to his senses and immediately issued a loud cry. Doxum's housing was unconscious on the boat of our hero and his student. It turned out that he was unconscious for 4 hours. The protagonist decides to repeat the prevention and, lifting his leg, is preparing to strike again. Suddenly, pirates begin to shout that they are already in place. Guys cannot understand what exactly he implies. A huge ship with black sails emerged on the maritime horizon. The dock exploded with loud laughter, feeling true for himself. The beard was extremely satisfied because everything turned out exactly as he planned. As it turned out, the trick intentionally delivered them directly to the main ship of pirates of the Black Whale. The dock triumphed and was convinced that these failures had no chance against the pirates of the Black Whale and their fate: to go to the sea. But in just a moment, the whole beats the abomination just in the face. Joe's dream warned his teacher, calling to be careful, but he ignored his advice, and now they were in a difficult way. However, our hero did not lose optimism. Yukion suggested Split to complete the task and return to the ship. In a moment, they rushed to the boat, heading to the pirates. Yukion does not hide joy from a future meeting with guests. It took a few hours, and the evening slowly covered the horizon. By this time, the pirate ship had already been completely destroyed, and among scattered fragments lay the breathless body. One of the pirates, although severely wounded, was still alive. He barely kept afloat, clutching a wooden board. An unspeakably exhausted man watched a little boat slowly moving away from debris. On board were Doc, and Jan. After completing all their business in this place, they only had to go on the road. The angry pirate added Kuklichka, crazed worm, without getting rid of how he found himself among them, and even with oars in his hands. Suddenly, on the opposite side of the debris to the boss, another surviving pirate floated. The boss wondered if they had a red signaling rocket. It was moist, but is it still functioning? However, if they take advantage of a signal missile, the boss will understand that they have arbitrarily assembled the task. But there was no time for reflection. It was necessary to start the rocket immediately. They are accustomed to the lords of the Lord, but now is the more important task of protecting the pride of black whales. The pirate prepared to launch a signal rocket, directing it into the sky. As soon as she takes off, their leader will appear here. A king should come here, capable of conquering the element of water and pirates. This leader leads to fear that covers even the boldest warriors of the battle world. At this point, the man is dressed in a green suit, calmly deals with his business. The man noticed how the red shell rose over the waters of Yangtze. Chegel Subam, a prominent advisor to the Chongum Union, was stunned by an event that unfolded before his eyes. 2 hours ago, the red projectile was released in the Yangtze River. You need to open the checkpoints immediately to Yangtze. The red projectile is a pirate signal that is launched only at the moment of extreme danger. The man did not know how frightening the reason could be. Unfortunately, they never managed to reveal the secret. which was the impetus for the launch of this projectile. Cheagle was boiled from anger, because it has been 2 hours, and these failures have not yet been able to find out what exactly led to the launch of a red projectile. If this enemy is so significant that the pirates have even released a red signal, then they are simply obliged to capture it. After all, the enemy of my enemy is my potential ally. He instructed to pass the order to the leader of the Green Dragons. Immediately go to the western checkpoint to suppress the riots. It is necessary to prevent the pirates to capture the water path of the Uhan, which includes the Cheonim Union. The fighters know that the projectile has arrived in the aquatic paths from Angoy to Huba. Upon learning of this news, Cheagle Subam immediately realized that the signal comes from mysterious black whales. According to intelligence, the water harvesting king is currently in the Echjo region. This meant that the harvesting king probably noticed a red projectile. A man with anxiety asks which of the Kiban guests has the highest status in the Union. The younger stray dragon appeared to pass the entrance exam to the detachment of a hidden dragon. It meant that the man was already here. The tavern has already discussed the fresh news about the released tool on the Yangtze River. The cake of the Kiban's younger wandering dragon, outraged by this news, because even the boldest fictions should be its limit. The boy tries to bring his friend who is too drunk and has already lost consciousness. The guy premises loudly, trying to bring his friend. The guy just boiled out of indignation. How did they decide to wake him up? He was not aware of what reason he was worried, because the only thing he dreamed of at this moment was to immerse himself in a blissful dream. He stirred him because the guy goes to Sheni tomorrow, where the war between the groups began, which means that their meeting is postponed indefinitely. However, this guy does not consider it a tragedy. Kai Dushin dreams of saying goodbye to a friend before a long separation. But the fun fees distract him. The festive mood is backed by wine glasses, fills the atmosphere. The boy was dissatisfied, saying that the shortage should not expect a drop of warmth or attachment. Almost instantly, he handed his friend a knot and asked to go for a crossing to find a band of corn. They should be carefully examined by the waterpath of Uhaman in the north. With these words, the boy at the speed of the wind flew out of the room. Just waking up after a strong sleep on the table, the guy who was, well, exhaled with relief. He realizes that most likely the king himself will intervene in this case, capable of curbing the elements of water. And no one would like this good vagrant to experience trouble. Meanwhile, mysterious figures travel on a small boat that fluctuates on light waves. The stranger, standing on the edge of the boat, looked carefully at the horizon. It was distinguished by an eccentric hat and incredibly white hair. It has come deep night, but the fragments of the pirate ship were still swinging on the waves. Passengers of a civilian ship were in a state of shock from what they saw. Their vessel has not been moved from place. Joe Sleep tirelessly drives down the enemies. Joe Dream immediately looked up and noticed his uncle. The main character at this moment competed with another enemy. Yukion, filled with determination to victory, struck such that his opponent was immediately faint. Our characters have faced serious difficulties. They barely returned with the captured whole Docksum as the pirates began the attack. Their number was only growing, and it seemed that the wave behind the wave of the invaders was increasing. The main character could not allow him to be tied, so he turned to the Doka. Yukion asked the pirate with the location of the nearest harbor. He insisted that the pirate should deliver them there to finally land. Suddenly, a stranger tried to jump on their ship from a height. He looked surprisingly unusual. In a moment, he, like lightning, flew on board their ship. After that, the stranger appealed to all the pirates, calling to listen carefully to him. As it turned out, there was a Duhin, a young dragon cabana, before the pirates. He announced that the ship was now under its protection and warned that it was better for pirates to retreat. The boy turned to our hero, assuring that now they can be calm, because the Union of Chongum took them under their defense. The protagonist seemed to recognize this fall, but the guy remained in misunderstanding, not understanding why our hero acts so strange. The guy shouted loudly, "Stop the ship," and the team immediately executed it. It turned out that this young man was previously a teacher Yu Hon in his past life. Pirates immediately rushed to welcome their guide. All vessels were at the same time immobilizing, and it was then that our hero realized what was really going on. On a small boat, some strangers made their way through fixed ships. The boys immediately realized that the King Corber of Water was approaching them. However, our hero is suddenly buried. The enemy was threatening. The enemy was the leader of the gang, with which the collision was undesirable at any cost. So he instructs the dock to immediately change the course. The Beard, along with several pirates, rushed to the ship. They quickly took the oars. The men struggled at the paddle and the ship slowly began to turn, but the boat quickly approached. The protagonist is clear. In such circumstances, it is impossible to avoid collision. Suddenly, the foreigner uses some of his skillful techniques, which he completely stops the ship, turning away the inevitable catastrophe. Yuhani is amazed and cannot comprehend what incredible force is needed to stop such a huge ship with such easy energy. Immediately on their ship appeared the water harvest and another giant. The atmosphere changed immediately. Kai Dushin with kindness met the king of the Yangtze River. At an instant greeting, Joe Dream joined, declaring himself a son of a kind of recess. Apparently, a mysterious stranger is not worried about their greetings. Suddenly, the hero feels a powerful breath of danger. Instantly focusing, he skillfully evades. At the same time, the giant grabs the throat and raises it above the ground. The legendary Watership King is enthusiastically looking at this mysterious young man. He is captured by the ability of this young man, who looks only 20, instantly capture Junsana's actions and skillfully evade. More impressive is that he possesses chi. The next moment, Junsan still holds the young man by his neck, and finally a loud crunch is heard. Having realized the seriousness of the situation, the protagonist turns directly to the elder. Yukion notes that the elder is a person with very popularity. So what is the point of intimidation of a young boy? It can only harm his reputation. The king is aware of the rightness of the weird interlocutor. Reputation cannot be risking. Therefore, without spending time, he calls Junsana with a gesture of his hand. Seeing this, the man immediately threw away the boy as if he was something superfluous. After that, he appeals to our hero to explain what happened and happens at that moment. Yukion is aware of the need to win a little more time. They will soon reach a meeting place from the Chonem Union. Fortunately, Ki Dushin remained alive. He scared his throat, trembling with fear. The hero is aware that any wrong word can cost him, because he faces a real monster. Yukion says that they sailed to Wuhan when pirates were suddenly attacked, who began to terrorize passengers. Our hero, full of courage and kindness, decided that his duty was to save passengers from the threat. The king clearly did not accept this lie to faith. It seemed that his anger was gaining momentum, slowly turning into a real storm. The guy was aware that urgently needed to invent a new strategy. His brain was working at maximum revolutions. The guy shared he comes from the family Yu, whose roots lead to Antpin. A man is probably not even aware of this family because she is in no way related to Murim. Despite all the circumstances, his family has strong support from the authorities. Once upon a time, his father was a prince, and even now, at the request of the emperor, he is taken care of by the heir of Intianf. His mentor, a brilliant strategist, taught that in order to win a word, you need to show a powerful support. If not, it is worth lying boldly. And this is what our hero has been engaged in this. However, the king does not understand the essence of events, because he is absolutely indifferent whether this man is his son. Yukon is aware of the failure of his plan and understands that it is time to invent a new strategy urgently. He has always been and will remain a pirate chosen since birth. He is indifferent to the origin of others or who stands behind them as all the little things in his majestic seafarer. The situation is extremely tense. The main character must do everything possible to protect ordinary passengers. The guy does not stop while these two monsters are on his way, because now he is too weakened to resist them. The divine strategist also taught that it is important to be able to press on the fears of the enemy. Another option is to attract it to something encouraging to ignite interest. It is at this moment that a new idea is born in our hero's head, and he appeals to the elder to listen to him. Yukion noted that he just shares his position to get acquainted closer and has no aim to be rude. A man still cannot understand what the new moon tries to bring. Our hero hopes that the Corrector King will still show mercy and have mercy on him. However, he realizes that after the guy has destroyed dozens of his ships, it is unlikely to come true. That Tajin focuses on his interlocutor, carefully catching every detail. The main character puts forward the idea of rewarding the pirate by paying for the damage caused. Yukion lives hope that this plan will be successful. However, the pirate's face remained unchanged. Does the young man really intend to offer him money? The protagonist actually offers pirate money. He is willing to pay and look forward to what price he will voice. However, the king did not respond to the question as if he did not. Instead, he suddenly explodes with loud laughter. Yukion cannot understand what is happening to him. Did he lose the mind, which was overwhelmed by the treasure? Soon the king finds himself next to our hero, smiling ominously. He confesses that this young man has interested him. Frightened by the sudden approach of the stranger, Khan immediately stepped back. Tajin advised to look around. Many people gathered on the rocks. Warriors with swords are already ready to fight, and they all belong to the Union of Chon. And does our hero guess why these people remain in activity? At first glance, these people demonstrate the allegiance of the Union, declaring their involvement loudly. In the meantime, they evaluate what will bring them the greatest benefit. Although they belong to the righteous sects, why did this young man decide to offer his help to save these people? Pirovi can be difficult to believe when the young man claims that these two are necessary to win the servant and save the world. Tajin studies our hero carefully and begins to understand what he has character. The king is not able to evaluate all the abilities of John, but it is certain that no failure would be able to track the agile movements of Junsana. The man does not have the choice except to check everything in person. The man notes that there are many problems in life that cannot be solved only by money. Currently, Junsan is rapidly rushing to the fox. Yukion could not allow someone to die, and immediately rushed to the defense of the young man. Our hero instantly was between the fog and the attacker, taking a blow on himself. He still could not recover from shock, but realized that he had to fight. Instantly, he bounced sideways, freeing up a place for their fighting. Meanwhile, Junsan was already preparing to strike the head hero. Yukion barely had time to evade, but the attack touched him, torn his clothes. A little more, and his life could break. The hero reflects on how to strike a decisive blow and win in an instant. His rival is a real master who reached the initial stage of the Radiant QU. If the battle is delayed, it is not possible to avoid defeat. He must focus all power in one blow to win. This significantly exceeds the power and quality of the inner chi, which is concentrated in the dinta. Yukion is convinced that the enemy will neither avoid or distract his devastating blow. However, the enemy does not seem to scare this blow at all. On the contrary, a brazen smile appears on his face. At this point, the king, squeezing behind, causes an accurate and powerful blow to the rival's head. Our hero simply cannot stand the insane power of blow, loses balance and fainting. The young man could not understand that the leader of the criminal plan was so insidious. The young man's eyes were already sticking together, and the last vision remained an ominous expression on the reflective face of the waters, who had a mockery. And in a moment, Kion has completely lost consciousness. Joe Dream was ready to protect his mentor and thought to get a battle sword. However, that Tajin glanced at him with a disrespectful look and wisely advised to avoid careless steps. Joe Dream was amazed at the heart, because even one look of the enemy was able to completely break his confidence. Risking his own life, Khan fought to save Joe-san. Is the guy now powerless to find a way to express gratitude to his teacher? A brave young man with a sword in his hand, full of determination, rushes to defend his teacher. It's unexpected for the king. Joe Dream decides that he will save the teacher at any cost, even if you have to sacrifice your life. The guy shakes with horror, but confidently aims at the sword on the opponents. At this point, Tajin realizes that it is a manifestation of the sword. Where did these nuggets come from? One of them skillfully opposes Junsana. Another shows incredible courage, breaking the art of quote. However, Joe Sleep is not feeling the best because the cruelty fully captured his mind. This was incredibly intrigued by a king capable of conquering the element of water. The old pirate came to the conclusion that this young man is probably a relative of Chan Sun. The young man did not listen to further, and in a moment, covered by fury and anger, torn towards the enemy. The pirate cannot simply kill him by depriving Bat Sun's opportunity to see what the young man will become in the future. In a second, he touches the floor with a bare foot, releasing a powerful flow of energy. As a result, the waves of the speech intersect, opening the space for the passage of the ship. Finally, they were on the shore. The protagonist gradually comes to his senses, catching a mysterious, pleasant aroma in the air. Opening his eyes, he notices Junasana, who watches him closely while enjoying the fried meat. Yukion immediately breaks on his feet, unable to understand what is happening. The man notes that first of all, it is necessary to quench hunger. This meat was catching and roasting Junsan. At the fire gathered Doc, Tajin, and Junsan. The king appealed to the boy to taste something because of course his stomach was empty. The main character is now far from this. In intense search, he looks closely at the surroundings, trying to come across Joe-sun. Yukion is covered by a frantic fury when he imagines that these scums could cause damage to Joe-sun or Kadushin. Fortunately, they were spared and nothing wrong. Joe's sleep was minor injuries, however. As soon as he wakes up, he will begin to recover. The king shares that he has a deep connection with Chang Sun, but even in such circumstances, he will not destroy the sprout, giving him the opportunity to develop. The protagonist heard it, felt relieved, and sighed quietly. Suddenly, a grunt was scared in our hero's belly. Obviously, the famine still made itself known. Yukion suspects that food can be poisoned. However, Pirate, as if guessing his reflections, reassures. They say that he is more immersed in these suspicions. He introduces himself more into a state of poisoning. After these words, the guy bitten a piece of meat and found that it was quite tasty. Tajin was happy, watching the guy enjoying their cuisine. At the same moment, Jo-sun was completed by the acupuncture session. The doctor notes that the king of the watercorn, King Dushan, as a surprise, asks how much time the beating to the hemisphere has become mercy. The doctor is amazed as a student owned by the chapter can be so foolish. If it were not for the intervention of the King of Water, this guy would have long been a disabled person. It is unclear that the king conceived about this young man, but he not only significantly limited his demonic QU, but also completely violated his circulation. The doctor moves away by transferring the duty to the responsibility for the care of the guy, while he hurries to send a letter to the family. Ki Dushan recalls the day when everything has changed. He remembered the moment when Joe's dream rapidly rushed to the harvesting king. Forget about himself. Anger and rage absorbed his thoughts. However, with only one movement, he stopped a young boy. A bright yellow flash exploded. The gray pirate, ominously sounding, ordered everyone to disappear immediately. The members of the Chechonem Union immediately realized that the king was saying quite seriously and hurried to hide their swords. After that, they grabbed the hero and quickly jumped back into their small boat. Kai Dushan stayed one-on-one with a faded Jo-san. The young man still could not understand why the king decided to take Mr. Yu with him. While the men stayed by the fire, one of them stretched out a piece of fried meat. It was Jun-san, miraculously watching him turned into a friendly friend, because recently on the battlefield he attacked our hero with a tiger. On the other side of him was a king who now looked like a simple grandfather. How quickly people can change. Suddenly, that Tajin extends the head hero with a drink and, smiling, suggests to taste. Then, a little cunning, asks for his age. Yukion swallows the drink and, looking calm, confesses that he is only 17. It impresses that at such a young age he has achieved incredible strength. The man asked if the young man had a mentor. But why know him? Just out of curiosity, or does it hide a different interest? That Tajin is questioned by the guy. Who taught such a gifted one? The protagonist calmly replied that he took such abilities from his son-in-law, who comes from the family there from Hubei. It was important to leave this story without unnecessary details. However, the pirates do not seem to be very trusted. That Tajin has mastered the martial arts of the family there, which are distinguished by courage and power. But the art of Han, on the contrary, is marked by plasticity and softness. Tajin realizes that the hidden here is much deeper. In addition, the method of ownership of the palm was radically different from the traditional techniques of the inner Zygon. Yukion cannot believe that even the Sword King did not notice it, and the pirate understood everything. The protagonist wondered if the king had specific requests. That Tajin was amazed, seeing how energy was used in such an unusual way, and now he is burning more than the details about it. This means that our hero has no mentors in Murim. Even Yukion is not able to remember the names of the 6 saints who once taught him in the previous life. Without spending time, the pirate suddenly proposes the protagonist to become his student. Yukion is in full surprise from the sudden proposal of the pirate to become a student. It looks like something absolutely incredible. If the guy agrees to become his student, that Tajin promises to forgive all the damage caused by the young man. The protagonist could not imagine that he would become a student of the Harvesting King himself. The protagonist did not even have time to answer this unexpected offer, as the pirate had already made a decision for him. From that moment, the young man became his student. The man noted that the young man did not show much enthusiasm for the ability to become his student, and thought, if a young man decides to reject his proposal, a man hints that he could resort to violence. Yuhona covers fear when he notices his grandfather's unwavering determination and unconsciously recedes a few steps back. Grandpa came to the rumor that the guy was swimming like a fish in the water, so it seems that fate decided that his path was a pirate. The protagonist realizes that he is lacking in grounds to argue, and he is definitely unable to withstand the pirate. The correctional king notes how many doubts about this situation are still raging in our hero. So, his grandfather rolls his sleeves and prepares for a fight with a young man, hoping that it will make him make a decision faster. Only a few seconds passed as the forest was filled with a powerful cry. After a moment, the educational conversation was completed. The grandfather, sitting on the stump opposite the boy, was drunk with alcohol. However, the young man has not made a decision yet and asks a little time for reflection. Here, the grandfather is theatrical, as if going to give the pilgrims again, and this instantly gives the result. The young man agrees to become his student. Yukion is aware that in this situation it is best to just make concessions. The young man agrees, but only if it will be temporary. He wants to find Doxum's Hun as soon as possible and return to the Union. Unfortunately, our hero has not received any news from the hanged Doxum on the second treasure. In order to get ahead of his servant and take possession of the treasure first, he needs to go to the Cham Union. If it reveals that John has become a student of the king, everyone will look at him, and he will find himself in a position when he feels like a frog who sees everything from afar. In order to gain the experience needed to expand the influence of river pirates in the future, his teacher must open new horizons before him. Yukion rejoices when he sees that the teacher has bought his lie. If all that the characters say now is true, the pirate is ready to take a short time. If the young man shuddered with a lie, then Tajin will collapse his anger on all and everything that is somehow connected with him, erasing everything from the face of the earth. He instructs Jundana to convey the order that Yuhan is now a young lord of their Yangtze dynasty, but this information should be kept secret from everyone. If this information becomes known to someone, the pirate promises to destroy the culprit without hesitation. With the speed of the wind, our hero jumps into the boat and goes to meet new adventures and deeds. The guy, convincing himself, insists that he is obeyed only as part of his own strategy. He firmly promises that he will soon win every pirate who will meet on his way. As soon as the boy absorbs all the spiritual treasures and magic grass, he will be able to defeat this old man with only one hand. Meanwhile, the water space of the water spaces settled on the stone, not stopping to taste alcohol. Suddenly his ears catch some voice, which makes the chat. Someone calls it water. When his grandfather lifts his eyes, he faces an angry vat, which rapidly goes to him. The man instantly breaks on the cry, addressing his indignation to this damn pirate for dared to touch his children. The king begins to justify himself, explaining that the man is misunderstood. The thing was that he learned of the presence of his grandson on the ship only when it was too late, and so he could not act. Chandream has already learned of the event. The pirate helped his grandson to clean the circulation. A dispute between men rapidly arises. The Sword King demands from the cursed pirate to return them to our hero. Chonsleep states that the protagonist is his student, and therefore the pirate is obliged to return him. However, it is clear that Tajin is just a lie. He knows that he is no longer changed, because the guy is now. The man asks what will happen if the return of Han fails. Only this question made his opponent rush with his sword. The lightning blow swept through him, tearing his clothes. The king of the swords in rage, feeling dislike of his enemy. If he did not have time to evade, he could already rest in another world. Instantly after that, he dived into the water. Tajin boils from rage. Did the king mouse just try to deprive him of his life? But here is not a joke. A vat sleep has serious intentions. It is only necessary to get out of the water as he promises to cut it into pieces. Finally, a gray-haired man realizes that he really had serious intentions. Then the pirate, focusing his inner power, calls for a gray-haired boldly attack. Jun San followed everything that happened. Chandream could not attack because the rival was hiding in the water, and the pirate could not rush on the offensive because the vat stayed on land. That Tajin sighed heavily, realizing that their behavior is reminiscent of childish wasteland. The pirate noted that the boy sailed for a long time, and probably now in the ears. In a moment, the grandfather repels from the board on which to swim and jumps up. With a second later, he finds himself next to her husband, Chan. The dream trusts him because despite his thiefcraft, he did not lie. The man puts the sword in the vagina and finally thanks the pirates for the salvation of his nephew. Tajin recommends that the man bend the glass before leaving to dispel fatigue and soothe the shower. Without thinking for a long time, the man agrees. The main thing is that everything was fine with his grandson. Meanwhile, the hero was detained in the middle of the endless sea. The guy tries to explain the situation, assuring that all this is just an unfortunate mistake. However, foreigners say that the Union will be able to decide whether they have agreed. Meanwhile, they are going to tie a guy. However, the young man was not too upset, because his path still led the Chanam Alliance, where he planned to meet with Han Doxum. Therefore, he decided not to resist to avoid unnecessary noise. When the gate of the Union opens, the cart is floating inside, and our hero is interested in exploring every detail around. The young man seemed to be in the forest where every tree was a gazebo. It really fascinated the boy, and he could not take his eyes. The man who watched our hero heard the legend, as he himself defeated mountain robbers and managed to repel sea pirates. Now he seems to be an ordinary young man who is appropriate for his age. Yukon thought how much people honored the head of Chong. Yukon is given to dream. What, as he becomes a hero, overcame chaos, and in his honor he will be made by the head of the Union. He imagines the moment when they come to him with honors and honor as a prominent leader of all Muram, when he becomes the head of the Union. But in a moment the young man gets aware of, realizing that in order to implement this plan, you should first focus on the fan of Doksami. Soon they arrive at a building where a great advisor performs his duties. They enter the room. Hardly the man crossed the threshold of the room as he immediately fell on his knees and began to greet. Before him was none other than the head of the Union. The leader stood by the window admiring the scenery. In a moment he invited our hero to enter. It was Lee Haxon, the chairman of the Chong Union, known as the White Warrior. The voice of a man is heard with incredible softness and peace, but in every word there is a great depth. It is not the desire to destroy, but simply calm confidence in your own strength. Teachers said that if Haxon was alive and headed the battle, they might have been able to stop the Chaos Servant. Grandpa notes the powerful energy that comes from this young man. Although he is only 17, his eyes sparkle as if he had an inserted spirit of the dragon. Chegel Subam taught one of the teachers of this young man in his past life, and the other mentor was the leader of the Union, before which even the bosses of his teachers were bowing. Yukion feels like a true tiger. You need to get together. Chegel Subam addressed our hero and asked if he had caused chaos on Yangtze. The protagonist recommended and explained that he did it only to protect people. He then wonders who he is, a mysterious middle-aged man who also found himself on the ship. It is strange that John did not realize who was talking about, because according to other passengers, he resolutely rushed to his defense. The guy believes that they have already reassured Doxum's hole, but it seems that he did not mention that the young man asked him about a millennial shell. Therefore, the honey should instantly invent a convincing answer. After a moment, the young man moves sharply toward the girl who gives them tea. Lee Haxon clutched lightly into the young man's hand, stopping his movement, but never realizing that he thought. It turned out that this way the hero answered their questions. The hero's response was unexpected. Without thinking, he rushed to help, risking for others. The grandfather, although he was laughing at such courage, finally acknowledged that this act deserved to win. Yukion is interested in how the saved man feels. Chegel Subam points out that he behaves somehow because he recently argued that he did not know him at all. They also have evidence that Han has used force, but he immediately finds an explanation, stating that he had succeeded, since Homan Doxum almost posed the serious danger of persecuted people. The protagonist frozen, hoping that his words would find a response and they would believe him. Chegel Subam reports that this person is currently in prison and asks whether our hero wants to see her. It looks as if they deliberately suggested the guy to interrogate the man to determine his true motives in this way and find out why he saved Doxum's hole. Yukion should take this opportunity, because he seeks to find out the location of the millennial shell. However, the protagonist remains convinced that his plan is implemented perfectly. Chegel Subam decided to find out how much time the guy was able to support this lie. Apparently, he suspects that all this story is a solid fiction. The last question concerned why the water's owner, the Harvesting King, showed mercy and saved his life. The guy carelessly points out that he already has an agreement with Pirate. He compensates for him all the losses caused. Lee Haxon did not intend to pretend that he believed in this phantasmagoria. He is convinced that the pirate actually intended to kill him. If they doubt his words, he advises them to turn to the pirate on their own. If the young man was seized, his father would definitely not stay away, so he was given his life. Soon the conversation approached the end and our hero went in his way. Men were well aware that the protagonist was cunning with them, but were forced to play the role of believers in his words. Their surprise caused the absence of inner strength in the young man. However, when his grandfather stopped provocation of the young man, he felt a slight response, which indicated that for spiritual exercises the guy was using another source. The chief is well aware that neither the corrector nor the Sword King would be worried about the ordinary child for no good reason. Grandpa believes that it would be advisable to keep this guy nearby. He will probably come in handy in their business. They intended to gather all the secret dragons from all over the world, combining them into a single combat detachment. However, at the moment, the results look quite joyous. They can be attributed to hidden dragons are usually chosen by the heirs of the family inheritance, so it is not easy to attract them to themselves. The doctor said Joe Sleep could soon reach a new level. It is rumored that he was also promoted by the Watership King. The young gentleman, seeking to save people, opposed the pirates of the Black Whale alone and managed to survive even after meeting with a powerful water absorption king. In addition, it comes from an influential family, has an attractive appearance, and everything you can wish. The voices testified that Joe Dream reached the level of shining during his stay with Yu Han. The grandfather only threw a spark for thinking, and all the components of the plan will have to collect on his own. At this time, the protagonist has already visited his student to evaluate his condition. The guy was wrapped in bandages from head to toe, even the face was hidden under them. Suddenly, the room breaks into the room and asks whether Joe's dream came here to become part of the detachment of a hidden dragon. Now the turn of this freak to work under his leadership. However, our hero is aware that he cannot just take and beat this scoundrel. And it is not just about it. The problem lies in other teachers. Suddenly, the main character grabs the guy an important document that contains a list of all parties to the detachment. The boy is closely examining the document and realizes that it lists all his teachers from his past life. There was Chong's A.M., a representative of the Tan family. Yuan Han is a legendary swordmaster from the Yudan clan, known for his immortal skill. Monk Shaolin named Vona Gan. Chigal Murin is a brilliant tactic gifted with strategic thinking. He intended to force everyone hated to him, using the legendary detachment of a hidden dragon as a reason. The intense atmosphere caused the anthill in the skin on the skin. A moment after the main character asks to bring him and Joe's son to the detachment of a hidden dragon,